Brand Innovators and your host for today. I am so excited to be with you for today's C-Suite and Marketing Leadership Program. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers for you today, executives from United Health, from Wana Brands, from Warner Brothers, from American Eagle. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. A couple quick, housekeeping notes. If you are going to be tweeting or posting along on LinkedIn or Twitter with us, we use the hashtag BILivecast. It's not too late to invite a friend. So you can certainly, if you have any colleagues, coworkers, mentors, mentees, team members that you think would benefit from today's program, you can just send them the link that you use to register and they will be able to register as well. And of course, if you can't tune in or if they can't tune in for the entirety of the program, it will all be available on demand on our site. So we have a pretty fantastic group of speakers. I know our first speakers are waiting in the wings. It's a bit special for me personally. Adam Kimmick, who's going to be joining us in just a moment. He's the Vice President of Digital Strategy and Communications at United Health Group, is one of a number of people who reached out to me about maybe 8.5 years ago and said, "Hey, David, have you heard of these Brand Innovators guys? You should talk to them. They could be good people for you to talk to and to meet with. They're doing some pretty cool stuff." And it was because of emails like Adam's and just almost a decade ago, crazily enough, that I met with Mark and Brandon here at Brand Innovators and opened up a whole new world of opportunities, for me and for the community. So I owe a personal big thank you to Adam for helping make that connection. And with that, I would like to bring him on. If he is ready and waiting, Adam Kimmick, Vice President of Digital Strategy and Communication at United Health Group, and our moderator, Johanna Mayer-Jones, a Senior Vice President of Partnerships at The Atlantic. So let's give a big round of applause for Adam, for Johanna. We are thrilled to have you both with us today. And Adam, like I said, thank you. I owe you a lot for that email introduction like 8 years ago. So really appreciate that. I love how things come full circle.
Thanks, David. And it is really amazing. I was telling Joanna in our introductory session that I can't believe I've been involved with Brand Innovators in some capacity for roughly a decade. I think it's outlived some cars, it's outlived some phones for sure, it's outlived some laptops. It's a great community and I'm thrilled to be here today.
Well, you are a true Brand Innovators OG. I can't say there are not a lot of guys or women in our community at this point who predate me. But you're one of them. So we're thrilled to have you here, Adam. Johanna, we're so happy to have you joining us and moderating. So I will turn the virtual stage over to you both, and I'll be back in a little bit when you guys wind down. So take it away.
Thank you so much, David and Adam. Great to see you again. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm Joanna Mayer-Jones. I'm the SVP of Partnerships at The Atlantic. And we're also really pleased to be a member of this very special community. Actually, you know what? Let's go completely off script and off the planned questions. And actually, Adam, I'd love to hear, what do you think it is about Brand Innovators that makes it such a special community? And why is that so important at the moment? And then we'll switch into your career and your industry and the future trends. But seeing as we're opening up today and Brand Innovators is hosting us, let's give them a little bit of airtime as well.
Well, I think it's key that you use the word community. Right? Many of us have probably attended a conference or we've watched a panel or tuned in for a webinar, and you're there and then you're gone. And I think what Brand Innovators just figured out a way to do is connect people, different roles, different industries, different points in their career with one another, and those relationships persist. There are people I met when I first started, gosh, like I said, it is probably about 10 years ago that I still keep in contact with today. There are people who have helped me understand, a trend, learn, how they're doing it. There are people I've hired through Brand Innovators. And so I think, if you really truly believe that part of why you invest your time is for the long term, then Brand Innovators has really cracked the code, I think, on bringing in some of the best, the brightest, the most diverse thinking that's out there. And these relationships do persist for more than just a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Community is going to be sort of a big theme that we talk through today. But I think more than ever, people are really eager and have a sense of almost urgency about hearing great ideas, sharing them, being part of the community. So it's great that Brand Innovators provides us for that, for our industry. But I know that that's what you've been thinking about a lot in regards to your community at work as well, and to obviously your teams and to the communities that you serve. Tell us, as we start to dig in, tell us a little bit about your role and what you've been focusing in on over the last 12 months.
Sure. So I mean, David said, it's rare to find people who have, kind of outlived him with Brand Innovators. And I had this moment the other day where my daughter, was explaining to me that, some of the careers that people her age, and she's 14 today, so happy birthday, Cora, are that TikTok stars and creators. And I kind of had this realization that I started in digital in 1997, and I don't know the first thing about creating. Like, I'm the worst creator. Like, I should never, ever create ever, right? And it's funny because I love taking photos and I love, actual photography, with a camera. But ask me to do an Instagram story, and it's the worst possible thing. And the reason I sort of start there is it's amazing how much within digital has changed in those 20 years, certainly plus, but frankly, the last 3, you can make a case, right, that the last 12 months have seen more change in how digital has played a role in building community and connecting, one of us locally, domestically, internationally. And so my role here at United Health Group, I lead our digital strategy and our digital communications. And what I've come to realize in being here for the last almost 4 years is so much of communications starts to look like marketing in 2020 and 2021 than it ever has before. If you think about organizations a decade ago, marketing and communications worked together, but really, I felt like worked problems and worked solutions complementary, but oftentimes in really different ways, right? The sophistication and measurement in traditional communications a decade ago would have been about, earned media pass along or, theoretical readership rates, maybe some sentiment in there. And now you think about the sophistication in communications, it looks so much more like marketing than it ever has before, right? It's about audiences, and it's about the right content and the right channel and the right moment and how to tell a story. And so it's been such for me, a phenomenal experience being able to join this organization 4 years ago, staying within the healthcare space and getting to see all the incredible work that our team members do globally.
Right, absolutely. So do you think that trend of sort of the, not maybe merging of the disciplines, but certainly more of the interdisciplinary skills between sort of digital and communications accelerated this year because you couldn't sort of separate the two? You couldn't have a comm strategy that then didn't think ultimately about, the distribution through digital, but also actually sort of digital was informing the comm strategy in a way perhaps it hadn't before.
Yeah, I think the best organizations have probably been there for a while. I mean, if for those of you watching, think about probably the very first time that you bought something online and tried to return it to a store, and the store was like, no, we don't take those online returns. You have to send them back online. And now the idea that you would buy something and not be able to return it back to the store is unfathomable. Right. And probably about 5 or 6 years ago, a really good mentor had said to me that your organizational chart should never be visible to the customer. And her point was that if you think about your team or your function as a silo, each of you brings your level of specialty to the table, but it's not done in a way that's really thinking about seamless experience to the end user, the customer, or the patient. And that has really stuck with me. And it's one of the things that if you've traveled, you probably noticed really well that. So you booked it on Expedia, but you want to be able to redeem your points. And then does the hotel have your reservation for this? And all you really want is, at the end of the day, is you want it to feel as seamless, as frictionless, and as easy as possible. You don't want to see all the different steps in the process work. You just want to ultimately, I guess in a 2021 world, you want to make sure that your Uber Eats actually just delivers. You kind of don't care that it was an Uber Eats, they're an intermediary that went to a restaurant that picked it up from over here. You just want to know that it actually arrived.
Yeah, totally. The thing that you said earlier is what strikes me. Like, you don't want your external customers to understand, or even your partners to think about your sort of internal org structure. How have you brought your team closer together so that especially in a time when we've been sort of physically apart, so that the internal, oh, you do this and we do this and this is how it connects, hasn't been an external facing factor?
Yeah. Honestly, I think a lot of it started with the organizational culture broadly. I mean, you can see I'm in the office today.
I was going to mention, wait, is this a real life office I see? This is exciting.
It is. And I think the organization was so empathetic in giving the level of flexibility needed for our team members. I've got 3 kids. My wife works, remotely. And I gotta be honest with you, I was so excited to be able to go into the office, right? I mean, the not having to share the Wi-Fi at home, right? And then candidly, there, as great as this conversation even between you and I is,
yeah,
I would love to have been having this right now, on stage in front of people, and there isn't a perfect substitute for that. And so when the pandemic really came into the fold, the organization as a whole was so nimble in being able to spin up everything from all the different hardware and software and platforms and apps that you needed to just stay connected, right? So Microsoft Teams and right, just like we're on a Zoom right now. But from a communications perspective, what I was so encouraged by, we had decided to bring to our team members a mobile app. And if you think about apps in general, right, the bar for consumer apps just gets higher and higher every day.
Right.
And in previous lives, I've worked on some amazing apps, Webby award-winning ones. And when we started the idea of creating an app for team members, we said the bar to earn the right to have team members want to download a work app on their phone, got to be at that consumer level. And it played such a valuable role in keeping team members informed, connected, inspired, engaged. And I only use that as an example because the ecosystem of communication tools to keep a diverse global workforce informed, connected, inspired, and engaged really required the way that you would think about talking to consumers, right? Do you need an app? Do you have to be able to spin up chat? Should you be able to text, message back and forth? How many emails do you want? I mean, the idea of thinking about your team members with the same level of sophistication that we spin up tech marketing stacks to be able to reach consumers, to be honest with you, I think that to some degree, you could argue they should be one and the same, right?
Right. Why do you think perhaps they weren't before? Because we sort of took the in-person community and sort of in conversations for granted, or is there anything in addition to obviously the remoteness of the pandemic that accelerated that trend around internal comms?
Yeah, I do think that the pandemic for almost every organization just expedited so many different roadmaps and brought about a number of new capabilities and possibilities. And so I don't think we were immune to that by any stretch. But what I think was what allowed us to move as quickly as we did. I think the organization has always been nimble and restless. And if you're thinking in 3-year, like if my team was thinking in 5 and 10-year roadmaps, but we weren't focusing also on the adjustments that are going to be needed in the next 6, 12, and 18 months, it's great that you've got the long-term idea, but I think we've all seen that long-term plan often gets turned upside down because there's a once-in-a-lifetime global pandemic. And so I think the fact that we were always nimble in thinking 6, 12, 18-month cycles internally did help us adjust incredibly quick. And then I think you saw the very best of so many of our team members and organizations. going back to the mobile app, which I would tell everyone, I mean, check it out. I mean, you can't download it and use it, but I think you can see a lot of the user feedback in the app stores. It's called Spark with a Q, SPARQ. It was informed by team members. It was designed by in-house creative staff. It was developed by our in-house engineers. And if you think about that diversity in skill sets to bring something like that forward, now think about being able to nimbly adjust to a complete change in work style. You have some of the best and brightest people here that enable it to happen.
Totally. One more question on the app, and then by the way, I see lots of questions coming in from our audience, which is exciting. We'll make sure we get to them as well. For other leaders that are thinking about building out their own sort of internal comms app and using this as way, I think you have something like 320,000 employees. Correct me if I'm wrong on that number. What type of everyone came together? It's got lots of different information on it, but what type of content are you seeing that people are really gravitating towards from an internal perspective? And I guess my next question is, has that influenced then perhaps your external comm strategy as well, given that at the end of the day, your customers and your employees are people going through the same crisis?
Yeah, so I'll start there at the end. The fact that our employees, our team members, are going through the exact same challenges, struggles, and challenges that our members, our customers, our colleagues, right, our partners are. And I think for a lot of people, I mean, certainly for me, and I think our team here, you saw that converge, right? I mean, we have 330,000 team members. We have frontline doctors, nurses. And so when you think about, the pandemic, you have people who are truly on the front line, right? And you have to take into consideration that, their priority is helping the people we care for and staying safe, right? And so, while yes, I would love them to open up, the email we send, or, check out this phenomenal article about some of the great work that's going on in one of our offices in another state. The idea that you'd get everyone to engage the same way, right? I think we quickly realized it was going to take back to sort of that ecosystem. It was going to take an ecosystem to actually make that happen. And when you said like what content, I think you saw a lot of similarity, that, with team members, we were all looking for, I think, positive stories. To be honest with you, I think the thing I wish happened more often in the world was that the acts of kindness and the positive stories took off as fast as, the negative stories do. And it was clear that our team members were, they were so, I think, emotionally invested in seeing all the good that the organization as a whole was trying to do in the face of the pandemic. And so I think you also did start to see some of that play externally, just broadly, not just United Health Group, but I think, right, I mean, there were so many amazing moments where we celebrated frontline, clinicians in healthcare in a way that we've never done as a society.
Right. And rightly so. Rightly so. Right.
100%.
Exactly. Yeah. Did your one of the sort of changes in the ecosystem, something that you mentioned, a question that's popped in here, which is sort of what sort of channels perhaps did you use, or different tactics perhaps that you hadn't sort of played with beforehand? I want to definitely talk a little bit more about how you're elevating the amazing work that the frontline workers that are part of your community are doing. But before we kind of get to that, let's just, did you build an app, your employees were coming to the app and engaging with it, was playing a different type of role for them? What about then externally? How were you how did your external channels sort of change, or what did you maybe test that you hadn't used beforehand? Yeah,
so I think that, what became, when I said like that, we started to realize that employees and team members, in a good way, acted really similar to the external audiences that we want to communicate with. I don't think there was so much what I might say, Joanna, as a wholesale adjustment to things, but I think we were faster than we've ever been before in getting content out. That the content that we created was more human. It was more real. Because honestly, sometimes it was coming directly from, from a frontline staff person, right? I mean,
Right.
I'm not sure if everyone remembers, but in the very early days of the pandemic, you had a lot of frontline staff who were taking photos of the conditions and just telling people, listen, like, stay home, be safe, right? This is what we're dealing with, right? Stay home so that, frankly, we can keep, people safe. And so when you think about the content, the idea of the perfectly polished, retouched image, right, which may take a week to produce, versus this very authentic and immediate and eye-opening and raw, sort of, piece of content. Candidly, that's the stuff that started to resonate.
Totally.
Right? And I think it was great to see, I think, across all audiences, the emphasis being put on wanting to hear those great stories.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that was a shift, I think, overall. I mean, I don't know if certainly I went down my own rabbit hole of, of things where you're like, okay, I'm like way too deep into this one topic and then you're like, I need something that actually just uplifts me. And I think we all probably have that.
Well, I think that the role that brands have played in the last year, and specifically, obviously, brands that are involved in the healthcare industry, in keeping people informed and educated, but then also inspired and uplifted, has definitely evolved and become more significant. Use the word authentic, and the stories and the content that we're using really had to be or authentic and credible, because ultimately you were representing frontline workers and you sort of had this role to play. It led me to the question, and you and I were talking a little bit about sort of purpose-driven marketing and how have brands' roles changed, perhaps. Talk to me a little bit about how, and this is a question that's coming from one of the audience as well, so it's clearly on everyone's mind, but sort of what's the change in business of brands, perhaps, as a result of COVID, and how do you think, if in the last year you've had a sense of urgency in the comms and authenticity and important stories to be telling, how does that continue? And does that continue? So the question is sort of really, what is the role of brands now, and how will their roles continue to evolve?
Yeah. So I'm gonna answer that in a slightly different way than I think you're asking, but I hope that
I'll steer you back if you go, of course.
Please do. I think if you look at some of the best brands and some of the best ads, and it's amazing that, like, for a portion of us, we actually do like watching ads. I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, if we ever get back to movie theaters, let's be honest, we thoroughly enjoy getting there promptly so we can see the trailers. And the trailers are just ads, right? But some of the best ads, I think some of the best brands have figured out a way to intersect. I mean, you said purpose, but I would say purpose, passion, and then product, right? And there's a team member on my team, and years ago he created a brand, and it was focused on clothing in athleisure for the LGBTQ plus community, and it was something that he was passionate about. It was something that was very personal. And he had shared something just the other day, a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn, and it struck me, right? It was one of those just really good examples of, right, even as, a small brand or a starting brand that he has, he's figured out the magic, right? I mean, purpose and product and passion, and just put them together. And so I think, what you're maybe a little bit alluding to is, has that, I think, changed, broadly. And I think that to some degree that it has, right? You're seeing, I think, brands as a whole sort of realize that, revenue first, and then sort of purpose at the end, is not satisfactory.
Right.
And I don't think it's just not satisfactory to customers; it's not satisfactory to your team members. And so. Part of why I joined United 4 years ago, the mission I thought was audacious, to make the healthcare system work better for everyone.
Yeah.
Wow. Like, I mean, like everyone. And
just a small little thing to
right.
to have an ambition again.
But that ambition, I think fuels people. There are people, when I look at our early careers interns come through, one of the things that we have a few different, like, I feel like Instagram worthy walls in the facilities. And one of them has just the mission spelled out. And the number of, I think, early careers team members, right? You're talking 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds, right? Sophomores and juniors in college, who that really does speak to them, blows me away. And it really, for me, it validates, all the reasons that I chose to come to United. And so I think those stories, Joanna, I think the way that storytelling has evolved, certainly starts to make sure that what you're including and what you're saying delivers on purpose and values and mission.
And there's also something really nice there about, like, or not just thinking about what's my external purpose, but almost sort of really looking internally first. Why are people coming to work for us? What's the role that we're playing? How are we advancing this industry? And then using that to build on your sort of marketing, external purpose-driven positioning as well. So that, again, back to that word that we used earlier, which is so it's truly authentic. And you're not sort of saying one thing to your external constituents and then another thing internally, but right from the interns and as to why they're picking United and why they're choosing United, all the way through to the very end of those that are in the community, being able to connect back, the bigger purpose. And you, like you said, that's an audacious goal to make healthcare better and to improve it for everyone. How have you, switching gears slightly from sort of marketing to the healthcare industry, what an insane year really it has been, but under the umbrella of digital transformation. Tell us a little bit about how the healthcare industry has really been impacted and sort of the adoption perhaps then of digital transformation, if you will, specifically for United.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting, the phrase digital transformation and what it is meant. Honestly,
it's all-encompassing digital transformation.
I mean, there are external consultancies that specialize in digital transformation.
Yeah.
I took a role years ago at Campbell's Soup, and part of it was digital transformation, right? And the real question was like, well, what does digital transformation mean? And for some, it's supply chain, right? So for some, it's thinking about consumer connection, right? Some of it has to do with data, right? I mean, it's such a wide and all-encompassing term. And when I think about, for the member, the consumer, the patient, the employee, like, what does an actual digital transformation mean? And I think what we saw the last 12 months, 14 months, telemedicine.
Right.
I mean, it exploded, and out of necessity, right? I mean, my mom will be 65 in June. I don't know if she wanted me to share that, but she'll be 65.
It's too late now. She's visiting you as well, isn't she? You're in trouble later if she's watching this.
And when I think about digital transformation in healthcare, she has virtual doctor's visits every 4 months. And part of that is they have digital trackers, on her that are capturing everything from heart rate and, oxygen levels. And I mean, it's unbelievable sort of the things that actually she can do from her house, 30 miles away from her physician. And if you had said that that's where we would be a decade ago, I think people say, yeah, like that'd be kind of interesting, right? But how could you possibly provide the same level of care? And I saw in the Q&A, one of the questions was sort of around data. And it's amazing with what people can connect with their physician now is unbelievable. And more so than anything, what I was personally glad to see happen over the last 12 months of the pandemic was, I think, a broader acceptance for mental health. And the increases in mental health virtual care, were just unprecedented. So, I mean, I think you asked sort of like, how did we even think about it? And so And I think one of my favorite examples was in March, so almost a year ago, right, a year and a month ago, March 2020. One of the first things that was offered, Sanvello, which is a United Health, company, and they specialize in telemedicine, specifically mental health. And one of the first things that we did was we made it free access.
Right.
And we sort of realized that mental health and being able to get that type of mental health care that you may want was going to be impacted and challenged. And so when you said, so again, like sort of like purpose,
right?
You have to think about the whole person. And I look at that as just one of many examples that, we like, this is the right thing to do. This is how you make the healthcare system work better for everyone.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's such an important topic for leaders to be aware of and thinking about, especially as the return to work, I say the return to work as if we haven't been working the hardest we've ever been working for the last year, but the return to offices and another significant change in how people are living is sort of perhaps on the horizon. Mental wellness at work, how making that app free, maybe training leaders. How else are United thinking about that conversation as it regards to both, their companies, but also their employees?
I've sort of felt like with respect to leadership that we've been more conversational in the best possible way. We've been more, I think, willing to listen, right? And not that we'd ever listened before, but I just think that, more than ever, right? I mean, when you think about what's in front of you, this challenge and how people are impacted, right? I mean, you had team members who had school districts closed, right? So now you're not just working from home or transitioning to work from home. You also have 2 kids at home who also are now in some mix of virtual care, virtual school and virtual care. And I think that we listened, and we tried to offer as much optionality, to ensure that our team members felt supported, that our team members felt like we were hearing them, that we were seeing them, that we were taking into account the challenges that they had. And again, I go back to, right, treating your team members the way that you would treat your customers or your patients or your members.
Right.
I don't think those two things were separated. I feel like we really did take that approach of listening to physicians, listening to clinicians, listening to members, listening to team members. And frankly, I feel like the leadership here, that willingness to be more conversational, be more willing to listen to feedback. I think that happened at all layers. I mean, I can tell you within my own team, at the very start of the pandemic, we used to have these standing 15-minute meetings at the end of the day. And we said, look, we'll cancel them if we don't need them.
Yeah.
But let's at least have the space so that if all we want to do on the call is just, express the level of exasperation that you have because, I don't know, your sink doesn't work now on top of it. Like, let's just take the 15 minutes and just use it for that. And it's amazing, that type of an approach, willingness to listen, provide better optionality, creates a more connected and engaged workforce. It creates a more invested set of team members, and it does make a difference. I don't remember who the brand was, Joanna, but at a South by Southwest Brand Innovators event, one of the presentations, it was a panel, and someone said, we realize that the happier and the more satisfied our team members are, the happier and the more satisfied our customers are. And it definitely seems to, I would say today more than ever, be that if you can do that.
It's kind of wild that it's almost revelationary, but I think it has been like a big learning through this last year that you can't just focus on your customer. Obviously, not that anybody necessarily did, but that sort of internal morale really has a deep impact on the other side as well. One of the questions from the audience here is, what experiences perhaps prepared you best for the leadership role that you're in today? And, maybe you've talked about that sort of need to be flexible, to listen more, perhaps what are some of the other leadership qualities that you're taking away?
I will tell you the last 4 or 5 years in leadership roles have probably been the most challenging for me, because you go from potentially being an expert in certain areas where you feel like, okay, I've seen this before, I know how this will play out. And the last, actually probably, I would say, probably the last 5 years, the willingness to be okay not knowing all the answers has been the hardest thing for me to do as a leader.
Yeah.
But frankly, the thing that has completely changed the trajectory of the success of the teams that I have and the organizations that I'm in. And I'll give you just a really good example. When I made the transition from marketing to communications, one of the first initiatives I had, I was asked to create a holding statement. And I was like, yep, I can do that. And when do you need it by, right? Because action oriented. Yeah, we need it by noon. No problem. We can get that done by noon. And I think I was maybe 40 days into the role. And I had a brilliant woman on my team. And I said to her, what is a holding statement? And she said, you know what a holding statement is? And I said, I probably do, but I've probably never heard it called a holding statement. And people who have, worked in nothing but PR agencies, of course they know what it is.
Yeah.
Listen, it's a really tight, succinct statement that this, and it conveys this, and it's the thing that we would use. I was like, oh, I know exactly what that is. I just didn't know it was called a holding statement. But 15 years ago, I wouldn't have been comfortable asking that. I would have just Googled it and then come up with my own version of it. And I think you have to be okay not being an expert. When I was at my previous role prior to joining United, I had probably one of the smartest women I had ever worked with on my team. And I had taken on a combination of teams, things that I knew really well and things I knew nothing about. And I remember the first meeting, I got to meet the new team, and I was thinking about that meeting. And I was like, I'm just going to go in and just be as authentic and honest and raw. And I said, look, I don't know a lot about the specialties within our team here. I don't know. I'm not the world's expert on affiliate marketing. I'm not the world's expert on this. I just get the whole entire, I was like, but I'm really good at listening. I'm going to trust all of you because you all are the experts. And what I am, really good at though, is I'm going to make sure that you understand how the work that we do ties back to the objectives that we have, so that in fact, we actually have the best strategies possible, which means that we'll have some of the most successful months and quarters and years as a team. But again, I wasn't if I had been put in that role 10 years ago, I would have done, right? Does that famous statement of fake it till you make it? There's a level of fake it till you make it that I understand the principle of that. But I would argue that today, a willingness to say, help, or I defer to you, or inform me, is more valuable than it ever has been before. And to be honest with you, I think if you have ever watched a child say why.
Oh, I do on a daily basis.
Right. Now, on the one side, right, where that's like, can you please stop saying why? I would actually argue that internally, if you can get 5 whys deep on something, even if you're not the expert, you will better understand it. And it's a game changer.
I love it. You're talking about sort of nurturing that curiosity by leading from the top with that curiosity and that vulnerability of, aside from anything else, when you're running big teams with multi-disciplines, there's no chance you're going to know everything. But almost to your earliest point, Adam, which is things change so rapidly in sort of digital marketing that if you're going to pretend to be an expert in everything, you're going to miss something. So, great leadership is taking that vulnerability that, I need to learn, teach me so that we can learn better together, the curiosity of why does this work, I love the idea about sort of challenging things that perhaps have always been done a certain way to evolve. But I think one of the biggest takeaways, and David, I've seen you jump in here, so I presume we're getting to a point of sort of wrapping up, but is that should stop necessarily taking thinkings that are for your external communities. I'm going to call them that because they might be customers, they might be members, they might be, they're sort of all encompassing. And then your internal communities and keeping them so very separate. But actually, one of the biggest learnings, especially as a health group over the last 12 months, is that humans are humans. And that actually, if you apply the same authentic storytelling, access tools, access to support, access to mental wellness tools, internally and externally, you're going to be able to improve both the quality of your employees' engagement and work, but then that has a huge ripple effect out to your external communities as well.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, if you want to do that really well, building incredibly diverse teams makes all the difference. And when I say diverse, I mean it in the broadest sense. I want people who've never worked in healthcare. I want, people who have worked within the business, right? And so when I think about my own leadership team, my leadership team is 100% female. It is representative of in the business, people who have never worked at United, people who have worked at United for years, people who are 10 years into their career, 20 years. I mean, that level of diversity, when you build your leadership rank, when you build your team, they will force you, they'll keep you accountable, right? I mean, they will make sure that you're considering your audiences and have you thought about this? And have you thought about this, right? I mean, we've got parents, we've got, people who have stepchildren, we have people who take care of their own parents, right? Like that diversity in the team, keeps us honest in thinking about the way that we want to go about connecting directly with our, to your point, external and internal audiences.
Yeah. Such a good point. It's such a good point. You said earlier that you're not very creative. And then you were like, but I actually take photos and I'm into photography. You also write a blog that is sort of like a trends-based marketing blog. As we finish out, I think it would be great if we could hear from you. I said this to you yesterday. I'm going to get asked for your 10 years in the future, and we're being recorded so we can look back on it. But I think a decade is way too hard to predict, seeing as none of us can think about what's happening in a quarter, let alone a decade. But tell us your top 3 trends that you think for our industry over the next 12 months that we should be keeping an eye on. And I think that's a great way, again, for the audience to get the most out of your expertise in the next few minutes.
So I think the first one is, I think we're going to see a flip in how real estate is used. And I use real estate, I'll come to this in a second, for experiences, right? So the idea of going to the movie theater was watching the movie first and everything else second. And if you actually look the last 5 years or so, and if you've gone to some of those theaters that have amazing restaurants in the theater, they've got phenomenal bars in the theater, I think you're going to start to see something like that shift, right? Where the purpose of going, where the movie is secondary, but the idea
the experience is first. Yeah.
And so that's just one, I think, vertical, example, but I think you may see some of that change, broadly. David, keep me honest, I think it was a couple years ago where we had the Brooklyn Nets and a few other sports teams on a panel, and they talked about how they had to figure out a way to bring the experience to the seats in addition to what was happening on the court. So this has started a few years ago, but I think you're going to see a flip just on the real estate side where it may be experience and the idea of community first, and then, the movie second. And right, if you've ever been in a theater where shh, quiet, it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be I'm really glad you're talking about this.
Wait, what are we watching?
Right. I do think that's one. And then the second, I would say, the idea of in-person experiences, I do think we're going to see a resurgence in it. I think, so many of us have talked about Zoom fatigue. You have an entire generation that I think is growing up. I mean, my kids are 14, 12, and 1.5. And I look at them and I say, you're growing up with this digital first world, which on the one hand is phenomenal. On the other hand, I need you to be able to have conversations that are longer than 5 text messages. And so that idea of maybe a slight market correction back to less digital, ironically, and more, I think you said human, right? More human and in person. And I think it's going to be really interesting to kind of watch happen. There's a whole generation, both my oldest play soccer, and both of them can learn something on YouTube, but it's not the same as in-person instruction where that coach is watching you do it and then correcting or saying, no, you're doing this great, and that encouragement. So I think we may see a slight shift back there. And then, I guess you said 3. So I think the third is the idea of buying more things sight unseen, so to speak, I think is going to be wild. We had a friend of ours who bought a house.
Right. I was going to say the housing market is a fantastic example of this, right?
I mean, look at how the auto industry pivoted very quickly to, you don't have to go to the dealer anymore. We'll bring the car to you. You keep it for like 2 weeks. If you don't like it, great, we'll pick it up. But I think that idea of changing the steps in an experience, I think are going to adjust.
Yeah, and I definitely think the sort of the rise in sophistication of AR and VR technologies there as well will only but accelerate that trend further. But you're sort of all really interesting that there's this like tension between the acceleration of the digital technologies that are ultimately going to make all of our businesses, whether it's media, marketing, movies, healthcare, more advanced. The tension is then with still our actually innate want for human connection and actually our necessity to have in-person connections as well. So it'll be really interesting to see how these two trends actually conflate and come together. And well, you heard it here first from Adam. David, I can see you. You're there.
We're a little bit over time, so I wish I could let you keep going, but we got some more great speakers coming up. So we'll have to put a pin in it and just schedule part 2. We'll have you guys come back and keep
anytime.
I'm sure
Thank you.
Can come up with 7 more predictions for the next decade. We'll just make it 10 for 10 and make a
next year we'll do the decade forward ones. Really,
we have our 10-year anniversary coming up in June, and that's actually the entire theme for one of the days of it is the next 10 years in marketing, right? What is it going to look like in that kind of in that world? And a lot has changed. You guys touched on so many amazing topics, from purpose to data to communities to team building and leadership. I loved it. We got a lot out of it, and thank you both so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Joanna. Bye, everybody.
All right, guys. We're going to keep the show rolling. We have another fantastic session coming up right now. We have 2 amazing speakers. We have Joe Hodis, the Chief Marketing Officer at Wana Brands, and we have Rob DeSalvo, the Chief Revenue Officer at Undertone. So let's welcome Joe and Rob. It's a fantastic, really fascinating space. You're in, Joe, at Wana Brands. Just the other day, I'm sure you saw Bloomberg had this really interesting article around the cannabis consumer and how brands in general are looking to pursue them. And they had a great quote from one of our other community members, Travis Freeman, who's the head of global media at Uber, who was just talking about that. These are not your grandparents' cannabis consumers. These are adventurers. These are people who are spending money on disposable income, on exercise, and on consumer goods. They're young. They're interested in experiences, and it's really interesting. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend you take a look at that. I think it was in Bloomberg just the other day. But Rob, Joe, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Great,
thanks so much,
thank
Dave.
you.
Appreciate it. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Good, Rob. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. Yeah, so I mean, let's jump right in. When we talked the other day, we were talking about how Undertone, where I am, just started accepting advertising in the CBD industry and CBD products last year, and how we've been investigating the legal restrictions around expanding that into the cannabis category. So we're really excited to get your take on things today and how you guys are navigating that marketing and advertising process and the restrictions to succeed in this category. So I guess let's start with the 60,000 foot view. What does the future of cannabis look like?
What does the future look like? Well, I will tell you one thing, which is that as I was listening to the tail end of Adam and Joanna talking just now, I was reflecting on the fact that the level of conversation we have to have about cannabis marketing is like down here, as they're way up here talking about really great global type stuff, and cannabis is not quite there yet. So
yeah, I mean, I think it would be great for you to give a quick overview of the category itself to educate some people.
Yeah, so it's a rapid growth category, right? So 7 years ago, cannabis was well, actually longer ago than that, was voted to be legalized in Colorado. We became the first adult use state in the country in January of 2014, which is exactly when I began as chief marketing officer for my former company, Dixie Brands. So I've been kind of watching it grow from the start to where we are today, and the growth has been immense. When I think about the fact that it's only been 7 years, and I look at where we are today, which is over half the country's population has access to recreational use cannabis, or will, as these various states implement their regulatory environments. And far more than that, 3/4 of the country has access to either medical or recreational. The audience, the addressable audience, has grown exponentially in the course of just 7 years, right? So along with that, there's been an interesting, I'd say, development as it relates to what does the infrastructure look like from a marketing perspective? What do regulations look like on a state-by-state basis? And what does the consumer look like? And how do we overcome the stigmas that Adam referred to earlier in terms of cannabis usage? Who is the cannabis consumer? And I think the good news is that, much like other social challenges in our country, younger audiences are looking at it and saying, it's just cannabis, right? I enjoy cannabis, or I enjoy alcohol, or I don't enjoy either. But whatever you want to do is fine, right? So that mindset, I think, is really beginning to be reflected in a lot of the public surveys. So I was just reading this morning, I think, every major survey group or survey house that has put surveys into market in the last year, it's been usually at least 2/3 of the country who are in favor of legalization. So it's a pretty dominant majority of the country that is now on board with it. And as a result, we've got a multi-billion-dollar industry that's growing by leaps and bounds year over year. But with that comes a lot of confusion, a lot of anxiety, also a lot of trial and error, certainly on the marketing front.
Yeah. So when you talk about that and all the different states that have come in, and now almost half the country, how do those initiatives evolve from when you first got involved 7 years ago till now? And how are you balancing? There's federal laws and there's local laws and state laws. How do you guys do that from a marketing perspective with all the different things you have to take into consideration?
Yeah, well, it's not easy, and generally, unfortunately, what you end up doing is you end up playing to the lowest common denominator, and by that I mean whatever state has the most stringent regulations is really ultimately what you have to play towards, because in order for you to find any sort of scalability across multiple states, which many brands want to include it, are now in. So we're in 11 states plus Canada. To create a custom program for each of the 11 states is probably not a realistic goal. So we tend to go towards that lowest common denominator, which means that we have access to some digital platforms. We have to play by the rules that Instagram and Facebook have created for anything social media related. We have access to out of home in some markets, and in those cases, we rely on third parties really to ensure that we're meeting whatever the regulatory standards are for a given market for something like out of home, and same for digital as well. So there's been a wealth of third party companies that have cropped up that have access to regulation all the way down to because it will vary by county and local city levels as well. So even within a state, you have variability across the state itself. But there are these third parties that are really helping to ensure that any of the tactics we put in market will meet those regulations. But as a result, it forces us to really look inwards to the stores. So the stores have become a really strong focal point. And then whatever our owned assets are, so our web presence is, and our ability to affect and drive visibility and sales through our digital platforms.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you mentioned social. I think that's one, social for every other category. That's the low hanging fruit. That's the easiest way to activate, from a channel standpoint. And with you guys, there comes a little bit more regulation there. So since that's not as much of an option, out of all those things that you mentioned, is there a platform or a channel that you guys have found the most success with, or have seen, have been the most beneficial from making sure that your message is getting in front of the right people?
Yeah. So the good and the bad of this, what I'm about to tell you, is that it is a great way to reach the consumer, but the bad is that it takes it a little bit out of our hands And by that I mean it's the bud tender. It's in store. So the bud tender really is, and for those who don't know, bud tender is the term used for the person in a dispensary who's making recommendations on products. That bud tender is infused with a lot of power, right? Because I like to say about 80% of the decision making process is influenced by the bud tender. Someone walks into a store, particularly a new consumer or an inexperienced consumer, and they see a wall of products and different, indica, sativa, hybrid, concentrates, edibles, and it's just overwhelming. So the natural question is, well, what do you recommend?
Right.
Well, okay, well, what are you looking for? And then you go through a process of elimination. Bud tender says, oh, this is the product you want. Well, if that bud tender doesn't like your brand or your product, much like any retail environment, they're not going to recommend it. But more so in this environment, there are very strong go-to brands, and becoming one of those go-tos for the dispensary is a matter of making sure that we recognize the bud tender as that conduit. So meaning that there are incentives and spiffs and ways that we're saying to the bud tender, hey, we really appreciate what you do for us too. And more importantly, from our perspective, is education. So we spend a tremendous amount of our resources on education platforms that have been custom developed for the cannabis industry to help educate the bud tenders and really give them the tools and the power to be able to educate the consumer about our brands and our products. And we see, not anecdotal, sorry, we see quantitative data that really demonstrates a lift in sales on an individual bud tender level when they've had the training, when they understand the products from the inside out. But that in-store is really where we capture a majority of eyeballs. The customer's already there. The bud tender is helping to make the influence in the sale. So that's been obviously a big part of our marketing budget historically.
That's great. Any history or little tidbit of info you can give on where bud tender came from? That's the first time I've heard that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sometimes I just say things now that like I don't even think about it, right? Bud tender is just what we call them. I think it probably originally came from the idea of like a bartender. Kind of they are, but bud is the flower that they sell. So flower being the plant, the smokable version of the product. Yeah. And they're always looking at buds. That's kind of how you look at nicely formed buds as the flower that you want to purchase.
It's like the sommelier of the cannabis industry.
Kind of, but early on, what happened is that, and this was actually a disservice to the edibles industry, and this is the downside, as I mentioned earlier, about not always having the control over that last touch point to the consumer, is that early on, bud tenders, before they were fully educated, they didn't have the knowledge base to know that if Rob walks in and he's never tried cannabis before, recommending what you like to consume as an avid consumer probably isn't going to do Rob a whole lot of good. And so we had, situations of edibles in particular that were recommended at, too high of a level, too strong. And that leads to some bad experiences. But I think it's gotten much better since then.
Oh, that's good. So, on the undertone side, we recently started working with a company called Philo, which is considered the largest provider of compliant cannabis and CBD purchase data. So, what we were wondering a little bit is how important is data when it comes to your advertising campaigns, and is there a particular kind of data or type of data that you guys find the most valuable?
Well, for the first, I would say 3 years of this industry's life, there was a dearth of data. I mean, there was no data anywhere. You couldn't get data. Right now, 7 years into it, we have a lot of good point of sale data. So we look at that data directionally, from a product in market, brands, margin standpoint, to see who's doing what in the market. And then on the consumer side, what we're still lacking really is really strong consumer insights. Who is using the product? How are they using it? When are they using it? And we've fielded some surveys, some custom surveys with a couple of different companies. And that's helpful, but it's not ongoing and broad data sets the way that you have in other industries, because we still are not really connecting that point of sale data, the consumer, and the research companies together, because oftentimes the cannabis consumer is still it's a very private transaction. I don't necessarily want to give my data. I don't necessarily want to have someone knowing that I'm purchasing cannabis, right? So there is still a little bit of that stigma. But when it comes to targeting from a digital standpoint, you mentioned Philo, for example, that compliance level that they offer is tremendous. And harkens back to an acquisition they made of Cannaregs about a year or two ago. Great company that kind of took the entire landscape of all the regulatory frameworks and then put it all in one single updated database, and they were able to lay that over all of their display buying capabilities. And I think that really added a level of value for companies looking to be safe and compliant in what they were doing. On the consumer side, what I've seen most effective, and this really works well for dispensaries, not as much for brands like Wana, is matching digital IDs, right? So then I know I've served up an ad to a known cannabis consumer. I'm actually able to track when they are in the store because I've geofenced the store, so I'm able to match digital IDs, and I'm able to carve out audiences that are cannabis consumers, and I can target them when they are intending to purchase, but also I can track and make sure they got into store. Now, we're still missing the last mile. I haven't seen a really good platform that allows me to connect that consumer in the store purchasing my product, but that's a result of the disparate POSs that all of the stores have. There's no standardized, one or two standardized POS backbones for all the stores.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So you talk about the legal restrictions on some of this stuff, and one thing that's we look at everything on the undertone side of things really through the lens of creative, and how does that creative evoke an emotional response from the consumer. So how do you balance that? How do you balance the legal restrictions but trying to be creative in the messaging that you have out there as well?
That's a great question, Rob. And I think I always approach it as a CMO from the standpoint of let's think as creatively and aggressively as we possibly can, and then we'll dial it back, right? I mean, same thing I would say about budgets, right? I don't want to do creative in terms of, well, what's my budget? I want to do creative in terms of what's the best thing we can do, and then we'll figure out if we can make it work for the budget, right? Same thing for regulation. I like to focus on the creative first and then worry about the regulation. The good news is that by and large, companies like Wana and others like us are pretty responsible players, right? So our goal is not to appeal to the most prurient or salacious interests of consumers. It's really to express the brand. Like for us, for example, our tagline being "Enhance Your Life." We really try to fulfill on that tagline with our creative. So we are looking at ways to communicate the fact that we are vegan and gluten-free, ways to communicate the fact that we are consistent and we have quality, right? So those are all creative executions that allow me to be creative. So with the vegan campaign, we did a big campaign with like a cow kind of face, and it was all about how gelatin gummies are made with animal bones and vegan or pectin gummies are not. So none of that runs afoul creatively of any of the regulatory. What runs afoul of regulatory is either A, speaking to an audience that we can't demonstrate is over 70% over the age of 21, mm-hmm. B, anything that would be appealing to children. So no cartoon characters, things of that nature. And then C is being, I guess, for us, it's easy because this is true to our brand, but for other brands, not being really in your face about consumption, right? It's not images of people with, bongs and joints and, a huge party. It's more about the products and the benefits they can provide. So all of those things creatively don't really inhibit us. It's really just making sure that when we put it into market, we're using vehicles and platforms that are going to meet those regulatory requirements.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I love being able to find good ways to creatively get your product's value props out there. I think that's awesome.
Well, although I'm sorry, real quickly, Rob, I'm sorry, I'm going to add something that's interesting. Yeah. So because it does vary by market, there are some challenges sometimes that you wouldn't expect. So for example, in Canada, Health Canada is the one that regulates the products up there. So our product does really well in Canada, but we aren't able to say certain things like vegan and gluten-free because they don't want, as I understand it, they don't want to promote anything that may sound like it is a health product. Right. They view those as health claims. So then it does become challenging to actually communicate the benefits of your product, even inside of that regulatory environment. In Las Vegas, we had an issue with fruits on our packaging when I was at Dixie because we couldn't display fruit on the packaging. Anyway, so there are those challenges too.
Yeah, and that's a good segue because I was going to say, as more states are legalizing cannabis every day, New York a couple of weeks ago, how do you guys, from a product standpoint, and product sales and even brand presence standpoint, what do you guys do? Like, what's your strategy when a new state comes on board? Do you guys go, full bore right in that state? Is there a method to the madness?
Oh, there's definitely a method to the madness. A lot of it depends upon the regulatory framework of a given state. So there are what are called limited license states. There are unlimited license states. Oklahoma would be an example of an unlimited license state. And as a result, you end up with 1,000 dispensaries, 500 different brands. I mean, it's pretty much a kind of a free for all. And that creates one set of challenges and opportunities. And then there's limited market state, there are limited license states like, for example, Missouri or Arkansas. That's a different set of circumstances. And then we look at the population. So if it is a medical only state, what do we believe? And we have enough historical data now to be able to look at a state and say, okay, this is the percentage of the population that is likely to get a medical card, so we can begin to gauge the potential revenue from a given market. But it's also the regulatory environment as it relates to product sets. So for example, in Pennsylvania, in their medical market, edibles aren't allowed. So we would have to put our pills or our tinctures into that market, not our flagship product, which is our gummies. All of those things really play into which markets are most beneficial to us. New York is a really interesting example because as a medical market, New York was not a great market. It was limited license, but severely limited. And the number of conditions allowable were so small that you didn't have a huge database of potential patients. In addition to that, you had a very thriving black market, right? So people in New York have been buying cannabis the same way for years, right? Dozens of years. So to overcome that with a medical market, a very limited medical market, just from a business standpoint, wasn't super appealing. Now, as a recreational market, different story, right? So it changes the nature of how we look at New York.
No, that's great. So there's actually a couple of questions in the chat. So I want to make sure we get to them because I know that the Brand Innovators folks want to make sure that we stay on time. So we got about 10 minutes or so left. Isabel in the audience, her question was, what is your process in opening businesses in newly legalized states? And does it start with the marketing team?
Well, no, actually it starts with our out-of-state team. So identifying a partner. So we can't go into every market as WANA and have a license in those markets. In some cases we could, but we choose not to. So in every market other than Colorado currently, we have everything from either a straight licensing agreement up to more of a contract manufacturing agreement in each of those markets. So finding that right partner is the job of our sort of advanced team, right? So who can we partner with in the market that has the financial wherewithal, the facility, the expertise that we culturally are a good fit with, because that's a very big part of our brand is our culture and making sure that they respect the community, they respect their employees. There's a lot of those pieces that we look at when we try and identify a partner, but that's the first thing, identify the partner. Next thing is then begin to understand operationally how to take our product set and operationalize it in that market, given the regulatory environment. The last step is once we've done all that, we've done all the training, we've got the facility up and running, we've ensured that they know how to make the product, then we worry about launching the product into market, and we will worry about distribution and marketing in that market.
Great. The next question that came in is, and I'll add a little bit to this because we actually didn't talk about this yet, so this will be interesting for everyone to hear. Who is your key consumer? What's the demographic? What's the age? And then the question actually that came in is, how do you envision your consumer demographic changing and expanding as this category explodes over the next couple of years?
Great question. So as I mentioned earlier, there's still pretty much a dearth of true consumer data. But we know enough to know, like for WANA, for example, we skew a little female, we skew a little bit older than the average consumer. So the largest segment is going to be like 21 to 32, I think. And then there's kind of a lull in the middle. And then the fastest growing segment is actually 55 plus from a growth standpoint. So our consumer tends to be a little bit higher household income because our products are premium and priced as such. And we tend to attract, I think, a consumer who is focused on quality and value. I mean, that's harder to say, to pin that down demographically. But why I say everyone is our consumer is because we are at such a nascent stage in this industry. So in any given community, I think the data would show that about 15% of that population has consumed cannabis in the last month in a legal market currently. When you look at that as compared to alcohol, where I think the numbers are closer to like 80% have consumed alcohol in the last month, there's a huge gap, right, in terms of the addressable audience that we eventually will reach once the industry continues to grow and we remove some of the stigma, we stabilize around regulation. And I think as more and more people try these products that are directed towards new consumers and that are a little bit easier to understand, more use case specific, we're going to grow that 15% much larger. At that point, in terms of that future consumer, I think we're looking at business professionals. I think we're looking at pretty much anyone who decides that it's better to have less calories and no hangover and have cannabis as a part of their life.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, one of the things we were talking a little bit about yesterday is just the different types of solutions that are out there. And you mentioned, some companies will come to you and the plenty of outreaches that you get on a daily basis saying that they can do something and they might not necessarily be able to do what they're saying they can do, especially in this category. So what advice would you have for vendors who are out there, even in Undertone, who are looking to expand their capabilities in the cannabis space? What are the things from a CMO's perspective that you want to make sure that they're coming to you with?
Well, there's two parts of my answer. One is, Rob, is the relationship side of it. We're definitely a relationship-based industry. And so when I was mentioning earlier, or yesterday rather, about all the inquiries I get, most of them are cold calls or cold emails, right? So those are the ones where, and I think this is probably true across industries, it's not just cannabis, but it just so happens that a lot of people have targeted cannabis as a new growth industry. So we do get a tremendous amount of outreach. And for me, not knowing who these people are or being able to differentiate the value proposition from one platform to the next, it doesn't compel me to want to get in touch with them, right? So going through from a relationship perspective is critically important. I think understanding the industry from the inside out, and being able to identify the pain points, not just tell me you're going to increase my revenue, not just tell me that you can help to automate my marketing, but really understand what that means to someone like me. Because I mentioned also yesterday that we are still so nascent that the infrastructure, the ability to leverage a really complex, let's say automated marketing system, most cannabis companies don't have that capability. They just don't have the resources internally, and they don't have the need for it because of the size and scope of what we do. So that's why I say understanding who we are and where we are as an industry, I think is another really important piece, because those are the ones I dismiss out of hand. I'm like, I don't have time to listen to your pitch about your, multi-continent platform that can do X, Y, and Z for me, because I can't even some days, find time to tie my shoes. So,
right.
Let's focus on what my real needs are, and they're smaller in scope than everybody wants to think they are.
So how did you guys adapt and adjust last March when everything shut down on us from a pandemic perspective? How did the strategy at Wana change overnight, I'm sure?
Yeah, well, first, a quick funny anecdote, which is here in Colorado, in Denver, when the pandemic, when they first said, okay, we're going to have to lock down and go into quarantine, the mayor went on TV and announced the quarantines and everything. He said, and we're shutting down dispensaries and liquor stores. You would have thought he said we were like, people just went completely bananas, and the lines within minutes at the dispensaries were like down the street and everything. Now, of course, he came back on three hours later and said, I misspoke. I made a mistake. Dispensaries are actually essential businesses, and they will stay open. And that was actually, even though I'm making a joke about it, it was actually a huge step. And then almost every other state other than Massachusetts followed that same path and said that cannabis businesses were essential. Huge watershed moment for us as an industry to be recognized as an essential business. And as a result, we saw sales really spike during that period where we thought dispensaries were going to be closed. They then came down a little bit, but then throughout the pandemic, they continued to climb. So we were the beneficiaries of not only that designation, but also the fact that I think people found some level of solace for their anxiety and for other ailments during the quarantine that really benefited us. But as a brand, we also knew that consumers weren't going to dispensaries, right? And so in California, you have a robust delivery system. In Colorado and other markets, we don't have delivery access. So we had to begin to understand how to reach that consumer without them going into the dispensary. So we implemented a few things, luckily, ahead of time. My former marketing director, she brought on board a company called iHeartJane. They do a lot of the back end of the e-commerce for a lot of the dispensaries. We were able to implement what I'll call an e-commerce light version on our website. So people can actually go through the Wana site and reserve a product at a dispensary through our website. That was a great way for us to really try to close that gap between someone looking at a product and actually being able to reserve that product directly on our platform. So we shifted a lot of our attention to digital. We shifted a lot of our attention to reaching that consumer with education before they made their decision. So we had to reimagine the customer journey as it related to a cannabis product, because that bud tender may no longer be in the middle. The other benefit, though, is that we also saw all of the hard work we'd done over the past 10 years of generating a product that people felt loyalty towards. Because what happened in the pandemic was people said, you know what? I don't know what the latest and greatest product is. I love Wana. I'm gonna use that product. That's the product I'm gonna go back to. And so we saw a lot of really strong repeat business as well.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting how, I've been so impressed over this past year how companies have adapted and adjusted and been able to find the sweet spot, which is good to hear. That's great. So I think we have time.
Just quick.
Yeah,
real quickly, just kudos to the rest of the company on the Wana side, because we were all locked down as well. I've not been in the office from the first day I started at Wana, which was the week that the lockdown occurred. But my point is that our operations team, our out-of-state team, we launched multiple new markets. We did all the training remotely. We got them online and on board. I mean, what the Wana team did during this pandemic was pretty amazing. And our compounded annual growth rate was somewhere in the range of like 38% year over year.
Wow, that is that's phenomenal. So speaking of Wana, let's talk about the brand for a minute. A question that came in is, what are some new products that Wana has either recently launched or will be launching soon in 2021?
Well, I'm excited to say that we have a lot of really cool new products in the pipeline, products that are going to be different than anything we've ever done, but I can't tell you what they are. Well, what I can tell you is
we'll all have to wait for the release of them.
Our greatest innovation of the last year, and this also was launched right as the pandemic was starting, was our Wana Quick line. So I know we're running out of time here, but real quickly, we understood, and it's not too hard to understand this, but for most people, edibles are challenging. The onset time can be variable up to an hour and a half. The offset time can be variable as well, up to 6 to 8 hours sometimes. Not everyone wants to strap in for that kind of a journey, right? So, so we identified a technology. It took us several years to do it, that allowed us to offer a product that is fast acting. So it activates for most people in about 15 minutes. So you begin to feel the effects of it. It also has a defined off ramp after 2 to 3 hours. So you're not, there for the next 8 hours, worried about your cat or whatever. And we were able to offer what is called we call it a smoker's high, but really quick science. When you smoke, it's a Delta 9 THC product. When you eat it, your liver converts it to 11-hydroxy, which is what creates a different experience for edibles, and why people sometimes don't have a great experience with edibles is because it's a much more impactful kind of a version of THC. This product encapsulates the THC molecule, so it doesn't actually get digested. It actually goes directly into the bloodstream, so it remains Delta 9, which means it's a completely different edible experience. Taking off like crazy. All three SKUs we launched here in Colorado were in the top 10 of Colorado. We just launched them in Canada. We're launching them in 3 additional markets. In fact, California just launched a week ago. That is our big lead product right now, and people absolutely love that product.
Wow, that's great. Very cool. So I know we're pretty close to time. David hasn't jumped on yet. So maybe in closing, is there anything that about the industry itself, about Wana, about cannabis that you want to share before we get cut off?
Sure. Oh, there's David right there, right on time. But I'll add this, which is, cannabis is is new, right? For the industry and for consumers, and there's still a lot to learn. Most of the really great players in the industry, and I put Wana in that category, their desire is to bring a safe product that people can enjoy and that can benefit people's lives. And so it's just going to take some education and some time, and we have to undo a lot of the damage that's been done by the war on drugs. That's a big part of our focus as Wana as well, in terms of our CSR activities. And so have time, have patience, and if you've not experienced it, in a legal state, I suggest try it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. I appreciate it. I think I'm sure everyone in the audience appreciates the education on the category, and I think that there's just so much info out there. Go out and read about it, and just see the tremendous growth that's happening here, because it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I appreciate you having me as well. Dave, we can't hear you.
It's always once a day, if not more. No, it's really fascinating, and the way that you guys are navigating, again, this nascent but exploding industry on the product innovation and the science of it as well, while you're also navigating the laws that are changed from state to state. It's really impressive. I mean, like just in the last couple of months, New York, New Jersey, New Mexico, lots of new territories as these laws change. So it'll be really great to see what you guys continue to cook up. And how you grow. So thank you, Joe, so much for joining us and sharing with our community. Rob, fantastic job leading this discussion. We're thrilled to have you both, and hopefully we'll have you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to continue for everybody out there on Zoom and on YouTube. We're going to keep this show rolling. We've heard from speakers now in the CBD and cannabis category. We've heard from Adam in the health and wellness category, and now we are going to hear from Aaron Lebzo in the let's call it the QSR, the QSR category, the dining category. Aaron is the Vice President of Marketing Technology at Del Taco. And we have Ken Mooring here, who is the perfect moderator, the Director of QSR Healthcare and Travel and Hospitality at New Star, is going to be leading the discussion. So Aaron, welcome. It's always great to see you.
Thank you.
Ken, welcome.
Thank you, David.
This is great. We have between we had Adam earlier, who is another one of my longtime industry colleagues. Aaron, I think our history also predates Brand Innovators, maybe to my ad age days back when you were working in the hotel business in Vegas. So it's a twofer today, and I love it. Things come full circle. So again, Aaron, welcome. Ken, welcome. The virtual stage is yours.
Hey, Aaron, how are you?
I'm great.
That's excellent. I apologize that my signage is backwards. I have no reasonable reason for that, and nor can I fix it. So Aaron's an award-winning marketer and has held a number of marketing leadership positions across quick-serve restaurants and the hospitality industries. Very happy to discuss leadership with you today, Aaron. So firstly, you recently became an advisor to Built by Girls. Built by Girls, for those who don't know, prepares the next generation of female leaders to step boldly into careers in technology. But before we get more into that, let me ask a selfish question. I have a daughter going to college in the fall. She wants to have a career in business. What advice would you have for her?
That as long as she goes to college and she has some sort of degree, that it doesn't matter what that degree's in, she has to find what she's happy doing, right? What she's passionate about. But most people change careers 6 times before they figure out what it is. So my degree is in theater. It's in acting. I joke that I still use it every day. However, it wasn't in marketing. I didn't go to school for marketing. I later went back and got a Cornell certificate for marketing brand strategy. But when I entered college, I thought I was going to pursue acting the rest of my life. And just because we go into college thinking one thing doesn't mean that has to pave our entire future.
That's an interesting point, because I've worked across startups and large companies. And when you talk to a CEO at a startup, they want to see comp sci on that resume.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying, find that passion, whatever it is.
Yeah, I will hire a go-getter, passionate person who is excited about learning over expertise any day.
Interesting. How do you assess that?
So I'm a big believer in the Gallup Strength Finder, which talks about someone's strengths, but you can hear it. You can start to understand. And I know that I've personally been tested for emotional intelligence in the past, but like you can start to feel if someone's one of those go-getters that's going to always achieve. And the Gallup Strength Finder helps to highlight that as well. But you do that over skills assessment, which once you get through the resume piece, it takes a personal conversation. I can tell you, I hired in Las Vegas a position that you couldn't find it on a piece of paper. It was an entry-level position, and I probably interviewed in 10-minute conversations 100 people in order to narrow down to 10 that I thought could be the right person.
Wow, 10 minutes. That's interesting. And what strengths did you have when you took the test?
So my top 5 strengths are communicative. So I like storytelling, positivity, meaning I tend to lean away when people are constantly negative. Woo, which is influencing others, or sales. Strategic. So I see the end before other people see the end. So I see like the plane crash coming before the plane crash knows it's going to crash.
That's helpful.
And activator, meaning like, let's go. Like, wherever we're going to go, let's just do it. We don't need to talk about it. Let's just get on the bus.
Nice. I think I took one of those tests, and I think I only had 3 strengths, sadly. So getting back to my daughter, because that's what this is really about, right? How should she, or really anyone entering college, challenge herself to be better prepared for the real world?
I understand why college exists, and I loved my college experience, but the real world is really what you make of it as it relates to like, what internships are you doing? How are you getting involved? I worked my way through college, right? That starts to get you set up. And I remember being in college thinking like, oh, I can't wait to get into the real world. And then I got into the real world and I was like, oh my God, I really want to go back to college, right? Like, because college was so much fun. And even though I thought I had all this responsibility, I didn't. So I got to try and test different things. I got to experience different things. And you're doing it in the confines of a campus where it's all people that are in one form or another like you, right? Like age, demo, they're all going through this experience together. And it's kind of going to camp for 4 years. So I would say to try new things and to experiment. And this is your opportunity to do that, because adulting is hard.
There you go. And I agree with that within reason. Thinking back to my college career, which wasn't always so reasonable. Now, getting back to Built by Girls, what attracted you to their mission, and how are you adding to their mission?
So focusing on girls in the STEM category and coming up in technology, there aren't a ton of women in technology. So this idea that we as women can be held to different standards than other folks was very important to me, and how we guide these students who are going into STEM, who are trying to decide what they're going to do with the rest of their life. It is also very important to me. So I got involved. I said, like, how do I get involved here? They had me go through a process to be a mentor. I was assigned a mentee, and we've had this relationship for now months, and she's absolutely wonderful. And she asked all the right questions, but you could tell she didn't have anyone to guide her. She didn't have anyone to go to say, like, how do you handle the fact that like I have no balance in my life, or I can't, I'm told I'm too quiet, or I'm told I need to be louder, and how do you deal with that? And so having the ability for her to be able to come to me and ask those questions where I could answer anything she wanted has been, I think, very helpful for her. She says it's been very helpful for her. And I know that it fulfills me as well.
That's very interesting. And that's an amazing resource. And thinking back, I wish I'd had a similar resource. Transitioning over to you and really the Erin origin story, and, at the risk of borrowing from Mark Maron, let's start from the beginning. How did you get here? Was there a plan, or were you just good, or was it a bit of both?
There was no plan, and I wouldn't say I was good. But I ended up here. No, I degree in acting, moved to Vegas, thought I would be a actress. And the only reason I lived there is because I had couldn't afford LA. Got a $600 apartment on the ground floor of a really crappy area in Las Vegas. Ate Jack in the Box, which is amazing. And we don't have it in the Midwest, but outstanding. And ate Jack in the Box until I could find a job, worked for a psychologist, which just got me through, just got me a paycheck so that I could figure out what I wanted to do. Accidentally fell into theater as a box office supervisor, then a house manager. That led me, which I loved, that led me to training and talent development. After taking a training course, they said, you're a natural trainer. Do you want to do training? That's like being on stage. Yes, absolutely, I do. I was able to, that's where I really learned how to coach employees and how to create leadership skills, because by default, I was teaching leadership skills to directors and vice presidents in a casino atmosphere. And then the recession hit and they literally went through and laid off everyone. And I remember just being like, I've never lost my job. I didn't do anything wrong. How could you possibly lose a job? And I got really angry because people kept going, oh, you lost your job. No, I know where it's at. I just don't have it. It's not mine anymore. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I said I would be a housekeeper. I would do whatever. They said, what do you know about internet marketing? I said, I have the Facebook. And at that time, like, it was cool to have the Facebook because I was in college and we had gotten it in college. And I was given a shot. Someone took a shot on me. I didn't know anything. I worked my way up. And the joke is like, if there was like totem pole, like whale feces, like I was below that, like on the totem pole. I would bring you coffee if you needed coffee. And I just started memorizing everything. I didn't have anywhere to go. I could work long hours and I started taking in and ingesting everything around me. I worked my way up. I moved over to MGM, did the same thing from Caesars to MGM, then to the Palms. I got involved in the community, Las Vegas Interactive Marketing Association. And then I had children and realized I can't raise my kids here. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And I'm sure people are listening and they're like, I grew up in Vegas and I turned out fine. I wanted a small town atmosphere. So moved to Dallas, worked for Wingstop. That led me to Freebirds. That led me to Hathaway. That led me to Marcus, which has led me to Del Taco. And it's always been through people you meet and you never know. And it sounds crazy, but you never know that like the person that you randomly meet and you're chitter chatting with could be your next opportunity or the next person to say like, hey, I want to introduce you to the so-and-so. And that's really how each job kind of came along. It was never like, hey, I went out and actively applied for that and pursued it. So I would say that it's only because I'm very blessed. I've been at the right place at the right time and I've worked very hard.
I love that story. And, you know, when I think about how I got into internet marketing or, you know, internet media, it was kind of, you know, the internet was the big thing for our generation. And I moved from the steel business, the metals business, over to representing websites and slinging banners and selling keywords for like $45 CPMs. That's how old I am. But like it's, you know, you got into this internet marketing and it's really propelled things forward. Was there anything that you were passionate about, or you were just like, this is a good opportunity for me? Or, you know, what was there any specific thing about internet marketing that got you excited?
I think what gets me the most excited about it is because it mirrors, it brings together the emotional qualities that true marketing has, right? Like what used to be your quote unquote traditional marketing, right? This storytelling aspect that I love. And then it matches that up with analytics, right? So when I first started in internet marketing, folks would be like, well, you can measure your stuff, but all this other marketing we've been doing, we don't actually measure it. Like no one had asked traditional marketers to show results for anything ever, right? Like back in the day, you'd ask well, how'd your commercial do? Like how much revenue did it drive? And they'd go, that's not what we do it for. It's brand awareness. And what I found is everybody was using this brand awareness term as like, that just means you don't know. You don't know how, if it made an ROI or not. You weren't doing a pre-post net of control. You weren't working with your finance teams. There was never this need to add math to anything we did as marketers. And internet marketing did that. It said, hey, you can tag it, you can track it, you can follow the conversion funnel, you can start to see different types of attribution, and you added this math layer into what is truly an emotional decision, which is marketing. And that was exciting to me. I have been given the opportunity in the past to go back into talent development and training and other careers. But once I realized I had a passion and a skill for something that I say in acting, everybody thinks they're an actor, right? Like everybody's like, oh, I could do that. Yeah, if I wasn't a lawyer, I could be an actor. And now I chose the second profession where people go, oh, if I didn't go into law school, I always thought I could be a marketer, right? Everybody thinks they can write a tagline and you're like, oh, so I chose the second like easiest career in the world, apparently. But I do love it. And I do think I just kind of fell into my spot there.
Well, that's great. Congratulations. Yeah, I remember the early days, you know, when the internet was beholden to every click, and then I spent 5 minutes working for a TV technology company with like rich media happening on TV and sporting events. And the first big deal we did, I was telling my startup lawyer to please build us an insertion order document. And then when we did our first deal with a big car company, I said, I'll send over the insertion order. She goes, what insertion order? And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, she's like, I'm not going to sign anything. I'm like, what? You know, she's like, I'm like, can you just approve the spreadsheet via email? She said, no. She goes, run the media and we'll pay you. And she did, and we did. And shockingly, it worked. But it's really interesting to me that you studied theater. And here you are, you know, these amazing marketing roles, winning a number of awards. Can you tell us how that experience applies to your job today, whether it's, you know, presenting to the board or, you know, at a conference or what it may be?
Yeah. So marketing is storytelling. Marketing or acting is storytelling. It's just a different form of it, right? This idea that you suit up to go into to walk on stage, whether the stage is, like you said, a boardroom, or the stage is an actual stage or a four wall, it's not that different. And I will say what has prepared me, the skills that came out of theater are the public speaking skills, the ability to work with all different types of people. I mean, if you're an actor, you don't think like, oh, you just work with other actors. You're working with a director who's a type of person, a sound designer, a lighting designer, and the fact that it truly takes a team to do anything. And I believe that everybody, including my children, should be taking some sort of theater course throughout. And when I received my degree, it wasn't that you just went to school and studied acting. I truly understand how a set is built, a lighting design, how a light, like I could get up in a rig and start hanging some lights if we wanted to. All of those things were really important. I could sew a costume. Don't get me wrong. Like if someone put a pair of pants in front of me, small chance in hell that I could like actually make them look like a nice pair of pants at the end, but they look good on stage because it's costuming. All the different aspects of it, you have to truly understand. And the same, I think, for marketing, to truly do a good job as a marketer, you have to understand all the aspects of the business. So whether it's how the tacos get made, all the way through how the P&L works, like I am not stellar at my job if I don't understand all the different pieces working together and then how to tell that story and follow it through. We've all heard as marketers that like marketers will tell me, well, I can market it. And then people come and it's not my fault they didn't buy it. Well, kind of is, right? Like it's kind of your fault that they didn't buy it because whatever you sold them wasn't what they expected. Whatever you advertised to them wasn't what they received when they walked in the store. So it is our responsibility to be involved in all the different aspects of the business because of that. And then in marketing technology, I joke with folks that I'm involved with anything that touches a device, which turns out to be everything. And there's really very few times where someone's like, oh, should Aaron be in the room here? No, I should be, because there's probably a technology piece that ladders into it from a marketing perspective, which acting and theater also get you set up for.
Yeah, when you think about even a high school play and what has to go on, it's for it to come off is kind of amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that's really good. It's a really good analogy. Now going to leadership, you know, the road to leadership can sometimes be different for men than women. Are there any specific challenges that you had mentioned that you faced, which other female leaders could learn from?
I've had a lot of challenges. So I've had, throughout my career, I've had 3 babies. I will tell you that I've been blessed and lucky enough that I was hired when I was 8 months pregnant. Many women can't say that that happens to them. I mean, I was carrying around a bowling ball. There was no way to hide it. And I remember being offered the position and saying, you know, I'm pregnant, right? Like, we should probably talk about this. And they were like, yeah, no, yeah. But like, nobody said anything. And I was like, so I'm going to have a baby soon. And they were like, yeah, no, we're in this for the long haul. We don't want you just for like a month. But we get it. We know that you're gonna have a baby, your family's important. And so I've been very blessed to work for companies that truly believe in the family that I have. There are companies out there that don't. I will tell you that I have had interviews in the past where people have asked, when talking to me, oh, what does your husband do? And I'm like, you would never ask my husband, if he was interviewing for a job, what he does, or what his wife does. And I've had interviews in the past that someone has asked me, oh, well, how many kids do you have? Oh, and I have no problem. Like, fine, I don't have to tell you, but I'll tell you. And they'll say, oh, well, this position requires a lot of time commitment. Yep. Never had an issue in the past. Don't plan to have an issue in the future. So those things, I don't know for sure, but I don't feel like some of my male counterparts have had to experience. I also will tell you that I used to be one of the only females at an executive table. And I was pulled aside once by the general counsel for one of the positions I had a long time ago. And she said to me, she said, I just want to tell you something. And I said, all right. And she was very scary. She didn't sit at the executive table because she didn't come to those meetings. And I said, what? And she goes, people are going to call you a bitch. Do not change anything you're doing. You are direct, you are focused, and you are a leader. But because you're a woman, they will refer to you as a bitch. Just let it roll. And I was like, and I was completely shell-shocked, walked away from that. And ever since then, that's stayed with me. And it has happened where people are like, well, you're pretty direct. I'm no more direct than anybody else that I work with. It's only because I'm a woman.
Wow, that's terrible and great advice at the same time. So thank you. And from your background, it's evident that you've been a process-focused leader since your start probably as house manager at Caesars. You know, what is the foundation of that? Like, how did you, in a sense, get that professional maturity so quickly?
Oh man. Well, in theater in Vegas, I will tell you, I don't think I had it. I didn't know what I was doing. They gave me a box office supervisor. They handed me 60 employees, half of which English was the second language, and they would speak Tagalog in front of me. And I never understood what there's like, they could have been talking about me. I have no idea. But I wasn't a good leader back then. I didn't know. I wasn't armed with the right tools to be a good leader. I will say it wasn't until I got into talent development and leadership training that I started to go, oh crap, now, yep, I should have done something differently with looking back. But that's also helped me be a better leader as I moved forward as well. I think that training young leaders on leadership skills and leadership capabilities is very important. I've never been good. I've had some, I wouldn't say mentors, but I've had some bosses in the past when I was early on that told me I needed to know my place because I was young and I had a lot to learn. And they were right. I was young and I had a lot to learn. but the first part they were wrong on, which is know your place. And for me, that's your place is wherever you want it to be. So if you want your place to be a step ahead of where you're at, then you act a step ahead of where you at. And so I would start to emulate the people that I followed. And I, again, was very blessed to have some very positive leadership role models. So I will tell you that when I worked at Caesars, I worked far under, right? Down here, top way up here, David Norton was the CMO. I started studying him. What does he do? Why does he make the decisions he makes? What information does he need to make those decisions? And then emulate that. And I think for young leaders, that's really important to find those leaders they respect and start to emulate that. And then because of that, they'll understand why they're doing it.
Well, it's really, that's good advice. And it's really good to see you giving back through Built by Girls to do the exact same thing. And you're probably doing that for a great number of your teammates as well now. Your career has really been on a nice arc, you know, VP titles, CMO titles, CMO.
Knock on wood. Knock on wood.
What's that?
Knock on wood, right? Like.
Well, yeah. And how, here's the jinxing question, if you're into those kind of superstitions, and I am sometimes. You know, how have you maintained that career arc?
I work a lot. No, I don't know. I've 2 times in my career have I found myself without a job. And the first time I panicked. The second time I panicked. And then like you think you're going to get in that situation. You're gonna be like, it's fine. And like I've known people who get in that situation and they go, oh, I'm just going to take some time off for me. And you're like, I'm not that person. Like, I don't know what that feels like. So the career in my stool, it's like career is a big piece of it. Family is a big piece of it. Friends and other activities, a little piece. And other things that make me happy, a little piece, right? So career has always been a really big piece of my stool. And without that leg there, it was very hard for me. And I think that it has allowed me to put myself out there and figure out what I really love doing. And that's working with people, driving businesses forward, and building cool shit is really what it comes down to, right? Like I really get to build cool shit during the day. And because of that, it translates to lots of different industries. And like I said earlier, it's about making the right connections, and you never meet a stranger. And I truly will talk to anybody, but you never know where that connection is going to lead you.
Interesting. And, you know, oftentimes we think about our current role as a springboard to our next role. I know you're very early in your tenure with Del Taco, but, you know, what's next for Erin?
I don't know. I'm never good at this question. Like people say, like, where are you going to be in 5 years? I don't know. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I don't know. At some point I would like to be at the helm. Like I'd like to be the CEO of a company, leading the charge forward. Will it be food service or casino or hospitality hotel? I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be, but I do know that I love where I'm at now, which is Del Taco. I love the fact, by the way, that we followed Cannabis with tacos leading up to 420 is not lost on me. It's really just like
to be an adjacency there.
Really solid programming by the brand innovators team. I really like that. I was super psyched to hear about that too. And hopefully not everybody they'll get to eat lunch after this. But I do. I love what I do. And I get to take all these pieces of the marketing puzzle and pick them up and move them to different industries. And that's pretty, I don't know. I get pretty psyched to be able to do that.
Gotcha. Before we move on to more Del Taco focused questions, here's an honest question, you know, that I'm, I guess, capable of asking, but not capable of answering for sure. Is, you know, is it getting easier for women in the workplace to succeed? Are we making progress?
Yes, we are. I think no matter what, not just women, any minority, there is some unconscious bias that still exists. Whether we want to believe it or not, it's probably easier to be picked up by the person that it's towards, right? So I notice if someone calls me like, hey, that's my girl. And I'm like, okay, you're my boy. And they're like, no, I'm a man. Oh, cool. Then I'm a woman. Right. So like simple things like that, like it's unconscious bias. They don't even think about it. They grew up saying girls versus men. Strange to me. Right. Like I spent some time this morning before work studying about how baby girl clothes are made very differently than baby boys clothes. And like, why is that even a thing? Right. So anyway, yes. Do I think it's getting easier? Absolutely. Compared to where we were. And when you look back and like when you watch the movies of like, you're like, we really just got the right to vote not that long ago. Right. Like, and so is it getting better? Yes. Or do we have a ways to go? Yes. And that's the same probably, I think, whether you asked a woman or any other minority, they'd probably say the same thing. We are making a lot of strides forward. We have a long ways to go.
Gotcha. My mom's been railing on the girls thing since the 80s when I think I started first becoming aware of such a phenomenon. So Del Taco, you got a new job during the pandemic. How did you pull that off? And was it strange never to truly look your new boss and your team in the eye?
Well, I'm flying out there next week, so I'm very excited to meet them from the waist down.
For the first time?
Yeah, for the first time. So
oh, great.
I was super psyched just to be able to book a flight, an actual work trip for the first time. And
booking engines are back.
Yes. So I will tell you that I wasn't like actively out looking for a job. I was working as the CMO of Marcus Hotels and Resorts, which is a wonderful hotel company. Hospitality, obviously with the pandemic, like a lot of our hotels were shut down. And Tim, who is our CMO and a wonderful gentleman, reached out and said they were creating this position. We started talking about it. It made, the position is leading marketing technology and kind of describes me to a T. So, and Tim and I had met years ago when I spoke at a Mobile Innovation Summit. And I remember we connected, we just chatted. And then years later, he remembered me. He followed my career and reached out. And so we started talking. I met with John, our CEO, who, if you have an opportunity to work for someone like John as a CEO, you take it because he is the type of leader that you want to get in line and you want to follow. You want to be there with. Tim talks a lot about how he doesn't want a group of people who all go the same direction. He wants people who have their own ideas, who bring different ideas to the table. And that's really what makes a great team. That's a team you want to work on. So after meeting with them, it made my decision very easy. I joined. I did tell them that I didn't plan on moving to California anytime soon, and they were fine with that. So I live in Wisconsin and work for a California-based company.
Nice. And describe your leadership style. How are you motivating your team against the objectives you outline for them, et cetera?
Yeah. So we always start by any of my teams that have ever worked with me. We do this Gallup Strength Finder, and we talk about what our strengths are and how they complement each other or they align with each other. In my case, my team all has very different strengths, which is great. It's phenomenal, but it also allows for us to understand, okay, here's why I come and say something this way. But when you come to the table and you say it that way, now I understand, because based on your strengths, you think about it in one direction and I think about it in this direction. How does that complement each other? So we do that. I'm a situational leadership leader, which means everybody is led based on who they are and how they're different. I don't believe that the same leadership works for everyone. I believe in communication. I believe in lots of check-ins and the ability to have open table. And there's a book called Radical Candor, very big into radical candor. Whatever you have to say, just put it out there so that no one makes assumptions. I believe that assumptions kill the soul because people start to worry about like, well, what do they think about me? Or why is this happening? Or what's going on here? You don't have to worry about it. You always know where you stand. So that's truly how I am. So far, my team seems to be okay with it. They seem to like it. And I'll tell you that when we talk as a group and people come to me and be like, what do you do? I'm like, I really work for them. Because I do. As far as I'm concerned, I work for my team. I work to sell the next taco. I'm not the boss. I'm not the leader. I'm the person that helps to guide them, and I'm helping push them from behind.
Interesting. Yeah. I love that diverse background and feeding strengths. I think that was the best lesson I took out of taking that test is, don't try to teach me how to be an accountant because I'm bad at accounting. Feed what I'm good at. Really like that. What KPIs do you monitor on a daily basis or at some specific cadence?
All of them. So the good and bad of marketing technology or digital marketing is that people are smart enough to know that there's analytics that come with that now. But because of that, they expect those analytics all the time. So we look at everything, whether it's web traffic, all the way to obviously the dollar, right? The taco sold. And we look at where the taco sold came from, right? What area that person was from, what they're doing, why they're doing it. My life right now is consumed with working towards the future of our new CRM launch. If you follow any of our earnings calls, you'll have heard our CEO, John, speak about the CRM launch and how excited we are about that. That kind of takes up our full day currently, and we're excited for that to still happen and launch in 2021.
Got you. That brings up, or is a good segue to one of my questions. One of your roles is, strategic partnerships and third-party delivery apps, and digital ordering.
Mm-hmm.
And, how do you maintain that balance between your own app, which is going to give you probably better margins and add to that CRM project, versus the delivery apps, which are ubiquitous, but don't give you as much as maybe you'd like?
Well, it's a different customer. So that's really what it is, right? The person that has our app is going to go through our app. That's just who they are. They're dedicated. The people that have your app aren't all your customers, and they're never going to be all your customers. They're going to be like your top 20%, your top 10%. They're the people that are hardcore fans of your restaurant or your hotel or whatever, your retail store. And so they download your app because of use, right?
Right.
We're not blind enough to believe like we're Amazon and everybody's going to have our app on their phone. They're not. We're going to have a good segment that do, but it's not going to be all of our customers. The people that go to DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, Postmates, etc., more coming on all the time.
Right.
All of those, that's a different customer. That's someone who might not be super loyal to Del Taco all the time. They're looking for, what's that DoorDash deal, right? What can they get there? And so they go through DoorDash, and that's where I have to be there so that I can win them and entice them in. And then eventually, do I hope to win them over to wanting to use our app? Yeah, just like everybody. But if not, I know I'm going to be there for them in those third-party delivery too. So I think they're both really important.
Gotcha. And your app has grown 38% or something to, 1.2 million users in the last year. How do you expect to sustain that?
Well, luckily enough, our restaurant company continues to grow as well. And with that, we've had more fans and followers jump on board and want to download the app and get the offers. And as we build and launch a new CRM, I think you'll see things start to change in the future as well. That'll entice more folks to want to jump on board.
Speaking of expansion, you guys recently moved into Columbus, Ohio.
Yes.
What about Columbus was attractive?
I think everywhere needs a taco. So, and they definitely need a Del Taco. I knew Del Taco when I lived in Vegas and loved them. We don't have them in Wisconsin. So people always go like, I can't believe you work in Wisconsin. You work for a company that like you don't have. And I'm like, well, that doesn't mean we won't have them. We will eventually get a Del Taco. But someone has to be the first. So Ohio needed Del Taco. They needed it. Why do we know that? Because we opened our doors and people were like, holy cow, we needed this, right? They were lined up ready to eat tacos. And not just tacos, like our burritos, even our burgers are delicious, which people don't even think like, oh, they have cheeseburgers. That's crazy. But we do. And they lined up. And so we'll continue to do that with markets as we continue to expand.
Gotcha. I see David there. He's got the big hook.
Oh well, I gotta find the virtual hook or maybe like a gong sound. We can add some sound effects. But no, this is great. I always hate interrupting and ending these, but you know, we gotta keep the show rolling. So you know, Erin, amazing as always. We love having you here. Thank you so much for joining us and leading the discussion, and we'll see you guys both soon. Hopefully in the real world one of these days.
Yes.
Yes,
Love
that would be
tacos.
great.
Yes, and we'll all have some. I mean, now I haven't eaten lunch yet, so now I'm craving tacos. I might have to hit my DoorDash or Uber Eats and see what I can drum up while I'm hosting here. But this is great. Thank you both so much, and like I said, we'll see you soon, and hopefully soon in the real world.
Yes. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, both. Have great days.
We are going to keep the show rolling. We have heard from different leaders in different industries: healthcare, cannabis, QSR, and now we are going to go into the world of retail and apparel and lifestyle. We have Ashley Shapiro here, and we have Michelle Schroeder, who's joining us to moderate this discussion. So Ashley is the Vice President of Media, Marketing, Performance, and Engagement at American Eagle Outfitters, and we have Michelle here, who is the VP of Marketing at Simon Data. So Michelle, can you see? I see you, Ashley. We've had you before. I know you're with us again. We welcome you back. Michelle, can you see us and hear us? I'm not seeing you on my screen.
I can see you and I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I can hear you. I just don't see you. I don't know if it's a camera. But we'll get that sorted in just a second. But in the meantime, you know, we can hear you pretty clearly. So let me just note to our. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Almost. Can you see me?
We can see you. It looks like I love the visual effects.
All right, let me turn them off. Well,
it might be the there you go. It might have been the contrast from the virtual background. I mean, we're close, but it's not it's the technology just isn't quite there yet. But Ashley, it's always great to hear from you and to see you. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. I will turn the virtual stage over to you both, and I'll be back in 35-40 minutes when you guys start winding down.
Great, thanks so much, David. I just want to say before we start how excited I am to be here with Ashley Shapiro, who's American Eagle Outfitters VP of Marketing, Media, Performance, and Engagement. Honestly, I think that every brand who's watching right now is going to come away from this conversation having learned something. And I feel that because Ashley has a really unique perspective on marketing leadership, on collaboration. And honestly, your team is on fire this year. American Eagle has had one heck of a year. So I'll let you introduce yourself. But first, hi, I'm Michelle Schroeder. I'm VP of Marketing here at Simon Data. Simon Data is a marketing technology company that just makes the right customer data available for the right tools and touch points. And what that does is free up marketers to make more and more effective experiences available and bring those to market. The bonus is that we also free up IT. We work with brands large and small, from your favorite direct-to-consumer subscription brands like BarkBox, Freshly, Blue Apron, The Farmer's Dog, as well as very large organizations like Fortune 500 financial institutions, major travel brands like TripAdvisor and Wyndham, to, of course, international retailers like ASOS and many, many others. All right, that was a lot of words. Ashley, I'm sure everyone would love to hear a little bit more about you, and then we'll get right into it.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Shapiro. I'm a brand marketer. I work at American Eagle. I'm truly a generalist when it comes to marketing, and I love to bring brands to life, really shaping that full customer journey, balancing love and growth and really leaning into innovation. My background really is all aspects of global brand and performance marketing, mainly in the retail sector, both luxury and more mass fashion. Prior to AE, I was actually a coach for about 10 years, where I focused on global expansion and positioning the brand as a global luxury leader, and before that, agency. But I'm really excited to be talking to you guys today about American Eagle.
Awesome. So your role, you know, as I was like trying to memorize your title, it's got a lot of commas in it. It's really wide. And what struck me in talking to you is just how well blended brand and performance are on your team. Was this an organic evolution? Is this something that you've seen before in your career history? How did that happen?
I think, to answer your question, yes, there's a lot of commas there, but I think that the evolution was organic in the sense that it represents the evolution of how Gen Z consumes. It's seamless. There's boundaries. They do not exist. So imagine a world where since the day you were born, you had something, one small thing, that allowed you to all the time, 24/7, explore, learn, connect, listen, and shop. That's what I just described as this. Because of that, it's why my role exists and why it is one role, I think, and why it works for us, because it is really aligned with that experience. I think that if you want to acquire customers, you shouldn't just acquire a customer for your price tag. You should acquire a customer because they love you for your brand, which means, or your product actually, but those two things, brand and performance, are always going to kind of be dancing. And I was talking to my team the other day, and the brand team was on the phone and the performance team was on the phone. And I said, it's kind of like you cook and you do the dishes. Meaning, the brand team kind of picks them up and then the performance team converts them over. But it really, I think, is representative of how the world, or at least Gen Z, consumes brands today.
Love it. It's funny, you describe the cooking and the doing the dishes. This is very much true in my household. If I cook, my husband does the dishes. If he cooks, I do the dishes. So it sounds like we're describing a little bit of a love affair, or, that real relationship. And in order to create that relationship with your clients, you've got to have it internally. You've got to have that collaboration. And so from our perspective, like something that we hear as a side effect of our product is that there's better collaboration between IT and marketing, between retention teams and acquisition teams, CX support. They just have more visibility into what their customers are doing. And it just floors me, despite your size and your global footprint, your team is hyper collaborative. How do you do that? And how do you maintain it?
It is hyper collaborative. I attribute that collaboration to a few things. Number one, this is the best peer group, and I'm not just saying it, that I've ever worked with, hands down, in my professional career, no matter what level I was at. We have very different strengths. We bring different things to the table. We know it, we respect each other, and we love each other personally and professionally. And I think that type of collaboration really trickles down throughout the organization. If you see a leadership who respects each other and understands how partnership can make things stronger, that is something that your team is going to take with them. I also said the word respect. I think it's critical to strong collaboration. The other part of it is really about being nimble. I mean, as you said, we are very big. We are a Titanic. We are the number one, jeans brand in the US, and we are global. We operate in 47 countries, but we move like a jet plane. And COVID certainly, I think, put that into play even more so. It united us. It put us at a level playing field with our customers, but also amongst each other. Everyone was in the same boat. No more was someone sitting in a cube, just to give a very literal example, and somebody else was sitting in an office. We were all sitting in our homes talking to each other and being afforded the same ways to connect to each other and collaborate, no matter what your level was, what team you were on, or any of that. So I almost feel like it elevated the collaboration and it made it more possible, as counterintuitive as that sounds.
No, not at all. I get it. And hearing the themes of respect as being sort of the underpinning of that collaboration. Yeah, I mean, do you have any advice for brands that are looking to sort of foster more of that collaboration, but are struggling with it, either through COVID or just generally?
I think number one, which sounds so basic, but hire good people. Hire people who want to collaborate. Hire people who respect one another, who are happy to stay humble.
Yep. Hire
people who listen, no matter what level they're at. Listening is really, really important, and always be nimble. I think that's the other key piece that, especially because we work with Gen Z, but even beyond that, in an organization, no matter what you were doing the past year in your personal life and your professional life, if we would have asked each other oh, did you think you'd be doing the brand innovator sitting in your dining room? No, we would have said absolutely not, right? So I think this idea of being nimble and being surrounded by people who really want to collaborate and who really respect each other, those things all have to happen in order for it to work. Without all of those things, I think you can't collaborate well.
Yep. So when we were speaking earlier, you said that your team's North Star is basically what Gen Z feels and says about you. And it's paying off big time. I think I heard you say that AE is the #1 jeans brand for men and women from ages 15 to 25. One challenge we hear a lot is how difficult that generation is to get their attention, to keep pace with sort of how their digital buying habits are evolving. How do you innovate at the pace of Generation Z?
Yeah. They are the largest generation, to your point. They're evolving every day. Technology is moving almost faster than that. And our job, to your point, if we want to reach that North Star, is to make sure we're the most relevant present brand out there. It's about showing up in the right way, at the right time, with the right content. That's our job. That's the core of my team's job. You have to listen. And I know I just said that earlier, but I'm going to say it again. You have to listen and you need to understand your customer. You need to eat and breathe Gen Z. You should not be showing up at the side part like I have. You need to have a middle part. If you want to talk to Gen Z, I'm seeing it right here, right? You need to really show up as a Gen Zer, and you need to listen to them and reflect them. And an example that I had shared with you, I think when we spoke the other day, was for me, if I was shopping for jeans, I would be very happy to receive a jean guide pamphlet in the mail that said, if you want it to be tight in the waist and you want it to have a skinny bottom, buy these. And if you want to flare, buy these. And I'd say, oh, great. Now these are the jeans I'm going to buy. Because that's how I grew up, or I would go into a store and that's how I consume. I would go into a store and I would see a giant billboard and it would explain to me what to buy or talk to the associate. If we think about Gen Z, social is their #1, and I will once again show everyone my iPhone, is their #1 source of education. It's their #1 source of everything, right? So we took a traditional jeans guide and we built it on Snapchat. That is where our customer is, and that is how they consume. So when I say you need to eat, breathe, and sleep them, you need to take what you want them to learn, what you want them to understand, what you want them to feel about your brand, and translate it into a way that they want to consume content so it's engaging for them.
Yeah, there seems like over the past year, AE's done some stroke of genius campaigns between the partnership with Addison Rae, the holiday campaign from last year, this jeans guide on Snapchat. I mean, I would have loved to have been in the brainstorming room, but since I wasn't, and since our listeners weren't, how did it come together and what made it so successful?
Well, Addison is a superstar. We know that across all, that's hands down. So let's start with that. Let's not pretend we didn't know she was a superstar. She is. She has over 115 million followers on social. She is the #2 most followed person on TikTok. But when we met Addison and we started to engage with her and talk to her, she really was a regular kid. Mm-hmm. Addison loved American Eagle. They were her favorite jeans, even before she became 115 million followers. She loved to dance. She loved music. She loved to express herself. And I remember the first call that I personally had with her, it was hard to remember that she was a superstar because she was talking about it like, I have so many American Eagle jeans in my closet, blah, 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 blah. So we really just felt that she already had such a connection to our brand that it was a very, very easy and authentic and organic fit. And then, of course, because she was the TikTok superstar and is the TikTok superstar that she is, and we cater to Gen Z, she already had a connection to our brand. So it was a little bit of both, I would say. It was a little bit of brainstorm. It was a little bit of meant to be. I would say all the stars aligned.
Yeah. And this is kind of a silly question. And I think I know the answer based on what you just said, but how much of that partnership or even some of these campaigns are based on, gut, like she's a superstar, we should partner with her if we can, versus data, like our target demographic is here. This is what the buyer journey could look like. This is where they'll fall in love with us. This is where they'll purchase.
I would say I think any good partnership or even decision isn't solely based on either of gut or on data. Some people might argue and disagree with me and just be data. focus, but I think that's the magic of marketing. With that being said, there is data. You need to understand their followers. You need to understand their relevance. There needs to be focus groups. There needs to be brand safety. Let's be honest, right? That's another thing anytime you're partnering with somebody. So I think it's a combination of that emotional connection and the authenticity of the partnership with that person, because you're basically, when you think about these influencers, they're brands. Yep. So you want to partner somebody who reflects your customer, but also reflects your brand and their values. So I would definitely say it's a combination of both, but the data is there. Of course, you need to do your homework always, always, always.
Totally. And you talk about sort of Gen Z being, having a phone from the moment they could. They can sniff out inauthenticity faster than any other generation.
100%.
Yeah. I want to go back to collaboration for a minute.
Sure.
And also that intersection of brand and performance, because it's something that we're always hearing, that there's a push and pull between those groups. And then a third group, of loyalty and a push and pull that happens there too. So your team straddles too between brand and performance. How do you guys think about loyalty? Are they in the room?
So there is a retention team, and it is led by my counterpart, Melissa Halverson. And to show you how collaborative those two teams are, we are actually called Mashly. That would be Melissa and Ashley combined together. Because it got to a point where people were kind of like, do I ask Ashley or Melissa? We'll just email Mashly. And that's sort of what ended up happening, because our teams and she and I were so tied at the hip and collaborative. So they must be collaborative. It's sort of a perfect question, but yes, we're very connected.
What, do you guys have an email alias yet that's like Mashly at American Eagle?
We don't, but we ended up having to share an office due to space constraints pre-COVID, and we did have a little Mashly nameplate, and I hope it's still there when we get back.
That is incredible. So between the Mashly and your team, does data ever help unite the three of you, the three distinct areas?
Yeah, I mean, it's more than three. It's actually, sorry to correct you, but it's really all of them, because Melissa, her world is really loyalty, CRM, email, as well as sort of our insights. And then my world really covers that media, performance, social, PR, and talent. So it really merges it all together, and data does unite us, because one of the most interesting things to understand is, how, in terms of how we acquire customers, which is a lot of what my team is really tasked with, you want to understand what channels are acquiring them, but then what's the lifetime value of them? Sure. What are they purchasing? What sort of products are we acquiring them on versus what are the products that are retaining them? And it's such an interesting story to watch, to understand, let's use an example. So if you were to acquire a customer at an affiliate, versus you were to acquire a customer through an Addison Ray partnership, what is the journey of those customers? What is their lifetime value? And how do you then retain them and serve them up with content? The second piece of that puzzle is really about the content. And the data piece, I think, isn't necessarily a new story from innovation, I don't think, but the content piece is. So an example for us is we are very involved in the gaming space. Gaming is the #1 passion point for men 15 to 25. So that's something that we love. It's a place where we want to be present, that we're pretty active in. So if you think about it, if you acquire a new male customer through a gaming partnership, like our collaboration with PS5, then once they come into our brand, you want to make sure that you're still serving them up with content and messages that are meaningful to them. Because otherwise, that authenticity that you spoke about earlier, it's sort of like, you took me on this really nice gaming date, but then you brought me home and you served me flowers. I don't like flowers in movies. I like gaming. So I think that partnership, almost to some degree, is even more interesting in terms of how we speak to each other and how we collaborate than the data piece, which we all know and love and we need to do our job well. But I find the content piece really, really interesting, because I think it's something we can all associate with and we can tie back to other journeys we've had with other brands.
Has the team had to change at all or adapt to support these content needs? Because basically, to have them come home and feel at home, you've got to have a whole lot of content that supports, what they're interested in.
I would tell you that every person on this call would say that content is, we've never as marketers needed more content. And it's not just more content, it's platform native content. Yes. You can't be serving up the same thing on every channel. I actually, I saw a meme come up the other night. I was personally scrolling through social and it said, do you understand what it does to me when you post the same content on Facebook and Instagram? And you can just associate with that so much as a marketer, but also on a personal level. So yeah, but the reality is, if we think about the world today, every single person, also known as literally almost every person that we market to, every Gen Zer, is a creator.
Yeah.
They have the capability to create content. So I think in terms of content, if we go back to, even 5 years ago, the sources of content and the choices you had were very different than today. You can pull out content. I can go outside and shoot some content, take my jeans off right now and take a flat leg. I will not. But there's people who are much better than that. But I think that it has created a different content funnel that I think all marketers, all marketing organizations are constantly having to evolve and adapt to.
100%. So even on the B2B side, where content, just like you're saying, it's never been more important. We've never seen higher engagement ever. I mean, the amount of people that will come to a webinar, download a guide, who want to actually come engage and learn with you is higher than it's ever been. But does that translate into an intent? Does it translate into a sale? That's the data that we can no longer trust. We can no longer say, okay, at this point, this conversion is meaningful. Is it similar for you and for your brand?
Yeah, I think you actually coined it really well for me when we spoke last time. I talk about a love affair. You said it much more eloquently than I did. But there is a love affair that people need to have with brands. And that's very different than the love affair that used to exist. So if we use, and not saying the old love affair doesn't exist, but it's slightly different, meaning you might have walked around a mall and seen a store, looked in the window, passed by. The next time, maybe you looked a little closer. The third time you went in, the fourth time you purchased. That journey can still exist today. But the reality is now there's so many other touch points that you can fall in love with a brand. And I think the interesting piece about data and somebody like yourself and where you can shed light is it really brings to life the need for brand media. It needs to bring to life that there is a time lag, that not everything has immediate results. And I think that is such a critical. First of all, it is a celebration for all marketers around the world, a tremendous celebration for all of us who all of these years have been trying to explain to our finance partners why we need above the line marketing. Like,
yes,
we told you so. So I think that's number one. It's a celebration. But you can prove the fact that you can't have one with the other. As I said earlier, nobody falls in love with a brand because they got a really good price. You don't remember brand because of that, right? You remember because of all the other ways that you engage with it. They share your values. You love them as a brand in terms of what they do, that you love their product. Mm-hmm. So I think that the data piece is just, again, a celebration for marketers because it shows how that full funnel is really what makes brands successful, not one thing. It's every person on that team, that collaborative team, that makes a brand great and successful.
Love it. So something that you touched on there, and something that we talk about all the time as a data company, the beginning of COVID, we found ourselves in the position of telling all of our prospects and clients, stop looking at historical data. It's no longer relevant. Even internally, like I said, about our content funnel and our buyer journey, just wasn't relevant to compare it to the past. And then now we're learning at buyer behaviors at really an unprecedented rate, and they're changing again. They're changing all the time as things start to open up. What challenges do you have around data right now, and how are you thinking about solving them?
I think the biggest challenge for me personally right now is very similar to what you just said. We all as retailers do an LY comp. Everything is an LY. And how do you compare to a moment in time where maybe all of your stores were closed or some of your stores were closed? You were 100% digital business. The world is not back to 2 LY, but the world is not LY. I mean, 2 LY, who even remembers 2 LY? Like that was like another lifetime ago, right? That was pre-masks. no one even knew what a mask was. If I said a mask, you thought I was talking about Halloween. So I think that figuring out what your metrics for success are and what your comparisons are as an organization, and everybody's leadership team will create those benchmarks and decide what's right for them ultimately. But I think that it is a little bit of a tricky situation to be in, especially I think for, some of the more analytical marketers. If I even look at my performance team, when they see the LYs, it really just messes with their brain. They can't get past it. But you're not going to see those traffic numbers maybe, or maybe you will, I don't know. But I think that's an interesting thing for us to do, is what are the benchmarks today? And in such a, I don't want to use, we live in an ambiguous world. This week and last week can be so different. And if we've learned nothing else, it's that. And in different parts of the country or the world even, they can be so different. So I think it's really important for us to all just be thoughtful about what the success metrics that we're holding to ourselves, and think about it in a new light, and be humble and live in the now.
Do you think so? You mentioned something earlier about it being a celebration, like a lot of this change and this ability to sort of show this long tail, journey that is based on a love affair that you're building step by step. Do you think that the collaboration you're having with finance, the collaboration, not the collaboration, but the relationship your team is having with this LY problem that I think everybody is experiencing, will change? Do you think the model will change, and there'll be maybe more innovation around the way that we think about marketing and the leeway that we give the team to do what they do best?
I do. I think that this is a personal opinion. It is not supported by anything real. I think that, as marketers, I think that you always need to have a plan, but there really is no plan. It's constantly evolving all the time. Whereas I think that we used to plan so far out. I think that timeline is getting crunched. And I think the collaboration with finance is allowing you to feed the business based on what's happening in the macro environment as well. So I think that collaboration is really important, because they've started to understand the power of marketing, I think. And if you can, there's things that you can do in real time in marketing that we used to not be able to do. I mean, back to our content conversation we just had a little while ago, you don't necessarily always need to do a full production shoot where everyone was planning further out. You're not running print media anymore. You don't need to book it 3 months in advance. You could book some Facebook advertising this morning and have it go live this afternoon. So I think that it'll evolve the timeline potentially, and maybe gone are the days of annual operating plan planning, and maybe it becomes quarterly. I have no idea. I'm not a CFO, nor would I ever be one. But I do think that there is something to this idea of time and being a little bit more nimble in real time that might evolve.
Yeah. I mean, there's a narrative, a running narrative here at Simon, that really marketers were the heroes of the pandemics for their brands. This digital transformation that had to happen immediately, all the reasons it had to happen, all the real-time data demands that we've had to answer because marketers were saying we need this now in order to keep things going. I mean, to me, it's again, exactly what you said. It's a celebration. So
you gotta applaud those supply chain crew, though. I mean, they might trump the marketers on that one a little bit, but I agree with you. The marketers,
they came through in a huge way. So you've set the bar, and your team has set the bar incredibly high for this year. How much pressure is there on you to keep it up?
You don't get to be best in class social for Gen Z without pressure. I will say that. And, we always talk about glitter and sparkle and the exciting stuff. And there definitely is pressure to keep it sparkly and glittery. But with that being said, I think the real pressure is you're setting the tone for future generations. I think it was something like 20 million Gen Zers were able to vote this year on the election. You're speaking to those people. I mean, we have a very big audience. We have very high awareness. We have a lot of channels. We have a platform and a responsibility to set the tone and speak to that audience in a way that holds us accountable and responsible for our actions. Those will be doctors and lawyers and marketers and presidents and moms and dads and all of that. And I think that is some of the pressure to some degree, but the other pressure that I think exists is there is a team that is working to make all of this glitter. So I think that there's also a lot of pressure to keep your team engaged, to keep your team balanced, to keep your team happy, to keep your team sleeping, right? I mean, earlier we talked about Gen Z and innovation and the pace of that. It is a full-time job to stay abreast to what's going on. I can't tell you how many times I'm in social calendar reviews and I say, what does that word mean? I don't even know what that means. You know what I mean? There is an art to that, and that pace and that excitement and innovation. So I think there's also a pressure to manage your team to make them feel that balance, because it's a lot, right? It's a lot, but it's something to be proud of. And I think it's also a pressure. I mean, I could speak for myself that I sort of love. I don't do well with idle time, but it's all good things. But that balance, I think, is really important, especially as you have a team. And, you know, when you do something great, you want to do something great again.
Yes. So final parting question,
Sure.
Any advice for brands that are trying to build and bake in that balance within their teams while they're also trying to keep raising the bar as you have?
It's hard. I would say listen. And that's been a theme a lot of this conversation. I think listen, and this idea of empathy that, you know, I've actually spoken about before at Brand Innovators, I think is really relevant, and it's something that we should all remember. So I would say push, listen to your customers, but also listen to your teams. I say it a lot, hire Gen Z.
Yep.
Your best, again, don't show up to talk to Gen Z with the side part, even though I'm sitting here doing it.
So much better though.
I know, it looks so much better.
I love side parts.
I know, I love side parts too. Even my hair cutter said to me, side parts look better on everybody. But whatever, Gen Z, you do your middle part, I'll do my side part. You know, hire Gen Z, listen to Gen Z, listen to your team, be present. And you can almost say the words that I said earlier about Gen Z, be present, be relevant, be nimble, should be the same way that you interact with your team. Be present. This circumstance that we're in allows you the capability to Slack or Jabber or whatever your company uses, every person on your team, just to check in, see how they're doing. You have no idea what's going on behind that Zoom camera, and it's hard. So I would say balance the pressure and the success with the fact that behind all of those cameras are real people with dogs and cats and kids and moms and grandparents and all of those fun things.
Awesome.
Be a person. That's actually it. Just be like a nice, normal person.
Yeah, which is easier said than done for some teams, but I think I found, at least, you know, leading a team virtually, I started at Simon right at the top of the pandemic. So never met my team in person. But in some ways, it made it easier to make sure that you're connecting with everyone and that you're giving everybody your full attention. You know, when you're speaking with them, you don't have sounds of the office kind of buzzing around. And you can really have these personal one-on-one connections with people and really get to know them as folks in their own homes. So we got to questions.
I talk on the phone now too. I mean, that's another thing. I like talk to people on the phone, which I never used to do.
Well, and I find like people open up more on the phone than they do, you know, in these like very formal feeling Zooms.
Agreed.
So we're getting some questions from the audience. This is a great one, and one that I also wanted to ask. What type of revenue does an influencer generate? How are you measuring the success of the Addison Rae partnership?
So I would not look at the Addison Rae partnership, to be honest with you, in totality in terms of success, although I do deem it very successful. You know, every initiative and everything that you do has different success metrics tied to it, which goes back to what we just said before about the love affair. You don't want to go off telling your finance partner that every time you do an influencer partnership, you're going to generate incremental revenue. With that being said, if you have the right person, what you put on their body will sell.
Yes.
You know, the reality is Addison has tremendous reach. She is very authentic to our brand, and she looks great in our clothes. She makes our product look great, and that sells. So there is definitely an element of product sell-through. If we're looking at hard metrics, there is, of course, traffic to site. Mm-hmm. There's engagement. There's follower growth. There's acquisition of new customers. So I would say it's several things, and depending on the initiative, I would weigh them differently. But of course, as marketers, you need to market your marketing. And I'm not trying to be tricky in saying that, but if you're speaking to your finance partner, your merchandising partner, they're going to be very interested on that product sell-through piece. That will be a key metric for them to understand. Whereas amongst some of your marketing peers, we are going to understand the value of engagement, the value of brand love, the value of traffic to site, even if it doesn't convert on the first try. So I would also say to look at your KPIs, know your audience, and make sure that you're managing expectations. And know that the first time you partner with them, it may not convert, right? Don't forget about the dance and the love affair.
Yep. Love that. And I love the call to market your marketing. Something that I think we all learned this year, defending the budgets, which was not an easy thing. But it's necessary. It's a necessary component for growth.
Agreed.
So we got another question about Gen Z. Big surprise. So you've got this global footprint, American Eagle Outfitters. It's not something that I knew. I've been a long time AE customer, though when I was more in the Gen Z age range. The jeans all still work. That said, how does that change the way that you're marketing to Gen Z abroad, like not just American Generation Z? Are there nuances and differences between those groups?
Absolutely. So as I said earlier, we are very much a global brand. We operate in 47 different countries. I no longer handle international at American Eagle, but I did. That's actually how I joined the brand, and then did that a lot at Coach. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. There are nuances. I think that what I would say is, and I'm going to give an example of actually that something happened in my past life that I think is very indicative of the variances in different countries and how trends evolve based on where you are. I was working at Coach. I was in the UAE interviewing media and PR agencies for a pan-Arab strategy that would spread across the region. And one of the agencies said to me that in Saudi, during Ramadan, that YouTube watching peaked at its all-time high, and that we need to get in the YouTube game. This was years and years ago. And I came back and I started doing my homework. We weren't doing anything really on YouTube. It was kind of being used for internal content, and started doing our homework. And it ended up being a tremendous opportunity for paid and organic content, the idea of pre-roll. What that says to me is not only is it about when the platforms and the trends arise, but it's also about seasonality. Ramadan's in June, which in a historical sort of fashion calendar at the time, June was a very low month in terms of what you would be doing in terms of spend because it could fail. But there you had a candid audience of people sitting at home watching your content. So I would say, yes, 100%. You need to be locally relevant in terms of your content, in terms of your channels. People do not adapt in different geographies to new technology and innovation and social platforms at the same times, and seasonality varies. So it definitely affects things, and you should be globally consistent but locally relevant.
Yeah, love it. Another question, similar vein, which is just how do you evaluate the technology that you advertise on? So Clubhouse being, an emerging thing. I don't know how much Gen Z is involved, but how do you think about new channels and new opportunities to engage with that generation?
I really love that question, Michelle. And the reason why I love it is just because something's new and shiny and sparkly doesn't mean it's right for your brand. As we said earlier, Gen Z has a great bullshit meter, and you shouldn't be on something that you can't play in an authentic way. Right content, right platform. So again, I'm going to use a terrible analogy. 40-year-old soccer mom should not be on TikTok. She shouldn't, no offense, but she shouldn't, right? So what I'm saying to you in that example is it might be a new technology. It might be new and innovative, and your audience might be there, but it might not be a brand fit. So you need to really balance those things all of the time so your brand's showing up authentically. If you show up in the wrong way, it's almost worse, I think, than not showing up. I'd rather not show up than look bad.
And this is why having brand and performance sort of married in this one role, someone who's thinking about risk, but also opportunity and blending it really well is so critical. It's something that I've loved as a theme in all of our conversations. Yeah. It's really incredible. And I don't know if it just strikes me as very unique and really well done at AE. So
thank you.
congrats.
Thank you so much. It was so fun talking to you.
You as well. I think we have 20 more seconds. So I do have one last question,
Okay.
which is just what are you most excited about right now that you guys are working on or that's coming up for you?
Oh my gosh. David, sorry, I'm getting my final question about what I'm most excited about. You're muted.
I took advantage of your non-presence.
I heard the beginning of the question, but I didn't hear the whole question. But I'm excited for the answer nonetheless.
It was going to be for David to come on.
No.
Honestly, a few things. So one, I'm really excited about our men's gaming strategy. It's such an interesting space. It's interesting because our guy is so engaged with it, but also it's such a new space. It's so much fun to learn about and discover. And I think as marketers, anytime we can discover a new space, it's really interesting. I think the second thing that I'm really excited about is to understand what the future landscape of retail is. Stores are on fire. We all thought, I mean, I can't tell you how many, in my PR role, I can't tell you how many questions we answered. Is the mall dead? The mall is not dead. Everyone loves going to the mall. So I think that I'm really excited to see what the future of retail looks like, how stores evolve into more experiences, what happens with social commerce, and it's just endless.
I love those topics. I mean, we've done a ton on gaming, hosting different private roundtable discussions, all esports and gaming. It's one of the hottest topics we get questions about all the time for our community. I can tell you right now, we have our Future of Media Summit coming up at the end of the month. I know Jill Toscano, who's the head of media at Walmart, is going to be talking a lot about social commerce and that content to commerce evolution. So might be some good material there to learn from. But these are fantastic topics. I love it, Ashley. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of course. And Michelle, amazing job, moderating this discussion. So I learned a lot, and I hope our community did too. So with that, I'll thank you both, and we will hopefully see you both again soon.
I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Fantastic. All right, we are going to bring on our last group today. We have two more amazing speakers for you. Jess Turner is here, and there she is right now from Warner Brothers. So let's welcome Jess, and we have Alexa Levine as well, who's going to be moderating. So Jess is the brand and the vice president of brand and marketing at Warner Brothers Entertainment. Alexa Levine, the head of entertainment at Snap, and I can see you both coming on, Jessica and Alexa. How are you?
Hello, David. Great to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome. All right. With that, I know you guys have a lot of great stuff prepared, so I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll be back in a little bit when it's time to wind down. But the floor is yours.
Sounds good. Great. Thank you. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Alexa.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I think we both got the glasses notice today and a little bit of red.
Thanks for coordinating. It always works.
Yes. So I'm so excited to see you today. Our session is meeting the most innovative minds in marketing. So congratulations. You are one of the most innovative minds. And
I can't claim that, but I'll try.
Really excited to dive in, but before we do, I think it would be really helpful to just get a better understanding of your role and the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll touch on it top line, because if I go into detail, it'll take up the whole panel. But I am vice president of brand and marketing at Warner Brothers, and specifically look after Wizarding World. So that's Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts, and really focus on fan engagement, how we activate the flywheel, which is all of the component parts that really make up the brand, and make sure that we're presenting one consistent brand story to consumers and fans around the world, and how we continue to cultivate and grow that fan base across those future generations. So that's like a very top line view, but I can dig into like any little pieces if it's helpful.
Yeah, I think that top line view just touches on what you have to do, which I know we talked about this before, but you act as this central person, your team, to making sure that everything around Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts are aligned and work together, which is a really difficult job that a marketer has to do today. So
yeah, I think more and more like brands are sort of having to work in this way, like not only in the entertainment space, but even outside of entertainment, as the way we manage our businesses and the partners that come to the table are being managed differently. It feels like historically we've been very different in the entertainment world and how we've had to manage our brands, and more I hear real similarities from other organizations that sit outside the entertainment world and other sort of industries, which is a really interesting sort of parallel, I think.
Yeah, that others are looking more into partnerships the same way that entertainment has been able to.
Yeah.
I think a big part of your job really is innovation. And there's almost two areas that I look at. One is innovating within leadership, and then also specifically within marketing and digital. And so I'd love to touch on the leadership piece first. And also to anyone who's viewing this, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in and we can sprinkle them throughout. So don't be shy. So Jess, when it comes to leadership, obviously this past year was interesting in its own right and certainly very challenging. And I'm curious, how do you feel like you were able to innovate in your leadership during the year? And are there any lessons that you learned that you feel you want to continue to practice, or anything that you learned that you said, you know what, not going to do that anymore?
Yeah, I think empathy has always been really important to me in leadership, but I think even more so in the past year. And I think, at our organization, we talk a lot about vulnerability, but I think as a leader, the impact of that has been something that I think I've noticed more in this past year, and the need for, vulnerable leaders has been more important in the last year, because we've been in this unknown world. And I think people, especially, people in teams and organizations, were changing left, right, and center. The world was changing around people, and there was just a lack of safety. Like, people didn't feel safe. And even in a team, in a work environment, I heard a lot across the organization, not just from my team, that people, who had done their jobs for a really long time were all of a sudden feeling very uncomfortable. Like, how do I do my job in this new world? And do I even know how to do my job in this new world? Mm-hmm. And so, really making sure that you displayed vulnerability and an openness to having that conversation, and showing that you felt safe to do that, in turn made others feel safe. And, I will say, like, I've always been someone who's been like, we can do it, like, we'll get it done type person. And not that I have shied away from vulnerability, but it's not been something that I've really thought consciously about. And so this, really thinking about, like, how can I be that person for my team so they in turn feel safe and have trust that, the vulnerability that they show is in a safe space, so that they can sort of move past whatever the blockers or concerns are that they have, and be, that high performing team that they are. And so I think that that's something that we will, continue to have to carry on as the world evolves. I don't think going back to what it once was is really the right term, but as we evolve to a different place, it is going to impact different people differently. So how can we continue to make those safe environments and continue to have those open dialogues that really, I think, as leaders, I will say, I've heard a lot of feedback that, you're playing the role of a leader, of someone who's driving the organization forward, but also the role of, like, counselor and therapist to many people.
Yeah.
Because this is so much of people's lives, and they're spending so much of their time invested in your organization. And so you need to give that time back and help them manage whatever their particular set of circumstances are that really are not getting in the way of them being able to do their job, but, like, hindering their ability to be a high performer in this particular set of circumstances. So I'd say that for me is the biggest one. And then there's been many ways that I've tried to, execute that. Some have worked and some haven't.
Yeah.
you know, being very open with my team about like, we're going to try some different things. And like, I just need you to come with me on this journey. And if it's crap and we all hate it, then like we can scrap that idea and move on to something else. But we've definitely had a mindset of like trying out new things and being okay to sort of work together to figure out how we want to operate in this world.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's kind of like you're doing test and learn, which at Snap, we ask all of our clients, as you probably know, to test and learn things and evolve. And so it does make sense that in your leadership, you would do something similar. I also think you noted that empathy was so important this year, and authenticity. And with vulnerability, similar to you, growing up, I was always told you should never cry at work. You should never let your true feelings come out. And I do feel like this past year, all of that has really broken down. And all people on the team want to know is that you're human and that you feel something too, so that they feel safe, that they can actually have an emotional reaction. So I felt a lot of that this year, which was great.
And I don't know about you, but I think it's something that I've struggled with as a female. Like, you need to be seen as tough and not like emotional, and you know, all the things that you're told as you're working your way through your career. And then all of a sudden that particular rug is pulled from you, and it's like, no, be all of those things. And you're like, it's so uncomfortable because you're worried about, well, what does this mean for perception, you know, from other leaders? And I know it's good for my team. So there is a lot of like, I think, push and pull that comes with feeling comfortable yourself as a leader in that space, especially as a female. But I think the test and learn has definitely helped to overcome some of those obstacles.
Yeah. And there also seems to be a balance of empathy, whereas I find if I over pivot and become too empathetic, then I'm afraid to give good feedback, for example, because I don't want to hurt feelings. And so I also feel like this year I've had to really find that balance, which is not easy.
And also we had a particular initiative that we drove last year where, you know, we were all exhausted by the middle of the year, and we had a couple of weeks to turn around, you know, a really big sort of fan engagement piece. And I found it really hard to like balance that empathy with really pushing that vision forward and making sure the team delivered that level of excellence I knew that they could deliver, knowing that they're exhausted. And so finding that balance of how you continue to sort of push them where you know that they are capable, yet understanding their levels of exhaustion or whatever else is going on in their world is a very fine balance.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Well, you have done a great job, because I know your team loves you. So well done. Well done. Just building on that, also feeling that you were able to test and learn and evolve. You work at a very large company. And historically, when you think of large companies, being able to take risks and fail doesn't seem like something that would necessarily be allowed or really promoted. How do you foster a culture that really does let people know they can fail? Because obviously to innovate, you have to be the first out there and try something that hasn't been done. But if you're afraid to fail, it's very hard to have that safety that we were talking about. How do you create that environment and culture?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, there's been a major culture shift at our organization to that place of taking risks and wanting to try new things and push boundaries and being okay. And in fact, celebrating when there is something that has failed. You know, I always try to flip it and think about, like, rather than a failure, like, what did we learn? And so for me, fostering that that sense of risk taking is really about making sure that whatever KPIs you're setting for your team or for your agencies or the people that you're working with is really about making sure that there is something in those KPIs that forces them to deliver against that. So, you know, for me, it really is about ensuring that, like, we think about, okay, what did we learn from this? So if you're not taking risks and you're sort of doing what has always been bread and butter for you, you're never going to get learning out of that, right? Because you know all the information, you know relatively how it's going to perform, you know sort of what the consumer or the fan feedback is going to be. versus if you set a specific KPI against like learnings, then you're gonna force yourself to take more risks or try new things and push yourself into new spaces that really give you that sense of, okay, maybe it didn't work, but on the flip side, we learned some information, and so that can help us feed into how we move forward. And then really celebrating that idea of we tried something that didn't work. And I've seen that from the top levels of our organization all the way down to, you know, even our team members doing that when each other have worked on smaller things that they've tried. So, you know, making sure that that you're not only celebrating like the big wins and the big numbers, but also celebrating like this didn't work, but the ambition was big, the vision was big, and actually we learned some amazing things. So, you know, credit to the team that, you know, have delivered that. So making sure that that is part of the culture, I think really helps you to feel comfortable with taking those risks, and that you're not only measured against, you know, the successes and the numbers that are in those KPIs.
That's fantastic. I love that it is really truly coming top down, because you need that support. And the idea of setting those KPIs, it's also, I've seen it work where you set them telling the team you should only reach 50% of them. So you set these moonshots or these really difficult goals, knowing that the team knows they may not get there, but they have the freedom to fail, which, as you said, is just so crucial to really innovating.
Yeah, I mean, and then we had one initiative last year that we launched where, you know, we worked with our agency partners, delivered a set of KPIs that actually sort of in the first week of activating, we actually met. And I was like, well, that tells us that we, you know, weren't ambitious enough. So for the rest of the campaign, we set much higher KPIs and then didn't quite meet those. But I think, you know, really that what that taught us is like our consumers are behaving in a different way that we're expecting them to as well. So like really listening to what you're learning through your KPIs and trying to be as ambitious as possible. Whilst also, I think, again, it's that balance of making sure that your teams are feeling like they're being successful. You know, everybody wants to feel like, you know, that actually like I did something and I did it really well, you know, and we're not always like failing or, you know, learning. It's like that can also be exhausting. So it's like, how are we delivering against things that we know are bread and butter? And there are, you know, there are principles that we've worked to historically when it comes to, you know, like 70% of what we do should be the stuff that we actually really know is going to work. And the other 20 to 30% should be, okay, that's like where we're investing time or, you know, energy or budget against things that are really going to teach us something and really are the big risks, so that you have that sort of balance of KPIs and deliverables that are really going to meet your targets, and then things that are really going to push you in new directions. And then we adjust those percentages based on really what the campaign is and how much budget we have and what we're trying to achieve.
That's great guidance. And I think a good transition into how you and your team are really innovating in marketing. Obviously, consumer behavior has changed drastically over the past year. NRG reported that for Gen Z and millennials specifically, 73% of consumers watched more video on their smartphone this past year than a year ago. And I don't think any of us are surprised by that. But I'm curious, how do you look at marketing and media allocations today versus a year ago? And is that different?
Yeah, so we definitely have a lot more digital, and we were pretty heavily digital historically, but when you don't have the ability to have physical presence and people aren't out and about, it really forces you to think about like how creatively how you will engage with your consumer. I think the first thing that we did as a team was looked at our sort of marketing initiatives for the year. And instead of redefining them based on digital, we redefined them based on what is our fan or consumer need right now? What do they need? Not where are they? And so we really looked at everything top to bottom. And instead of just shifting where we were talking to them, it was like, how are we talking to them? What are we doing for them? How are we supporting them? And really came up with initiatives that really helped to support that fan need or that consumer need. And so I think that that's something that I would love for us to think about as, you know, as we return to some sense of normal world is instead of just thinking about where they're at, like what is it that they need and how can our brand sort of meet them or help serve that need? And there will be cases where we can't, that's just not our place or our role to play in. And there will be places where we can, and we can get really creative. And I think looking at it from that perspective helps you to then think about like, okay, if we're thinking about what they need and how we deliver that, like it's also like where do we deliver that becomes like a part of the conversation.
Can you give an example over the past year of that that thought process of what do they need and how does that translate into marketing?
So for us, we talk about it as like content marketing. So, you know, early pandemic, it was about, okay, like what they need is content and engagement, right? And so it's really about like, okay, and everyone's stuck at home and they just need to be entertained. Well, we're an entertainment IP. And so how do we help support that need with content and engaging activities? And then sort of when we got into like the summer and the later stages of the year, actually what we were finding is people were just like craving that sense of community. And so and that connection and feeling like connected beyond, you know, their Zoom meetings or their school Zoom calls or, you know, even like family Zoom calls. People just had this like, I want to do something else, but the options are very limited. And so connecting them through their passions was something that we could really lean into. So creating, you know, a sense of virtual community through content and content initiatives was something that we really lent into and sort of wanted to try and bring people together for a moment of connection. So we sort of like evolved based on you know, based on those, and then going into Christmas again, it was like, how do we support Christmas traditions and that sense of giving and connection through our IP, where, you know, we've seen a lot of fans really lean into our IP at Christmas because there's this sense of like family and gathering and watching movies and creating together. So that was sort of the journey that we went on last year, and we're continuing to evolve that thinking based on, you know, how the pandemic sort of changes and ebbs and flows, and how, you know, the consumers are responding to that.
Yeah, and do you find that it's just made your job more difficult because you are having to be so reactive to these constant changes in behavior and needs?
I think it's made, I wouldn't say difficult. I would say it's definitely made us more creative, which is, you know, a fun place to be. Like when I think sometimes the places where you can be the most creative are when you're told you can't do something, or when like a particular avenue is shut off for you. That tends to be the, you know, some of the ways that you can best brainstorm is when you're told you can't spend money or you can't do what you would normally do. So, you know, the world gave us that and, you know, forced us to be a bit more creative. And so I think it presented different challenges. So how do you be more nimble? How do you have lower standards for execution, for example, because you have to be faster and you have specific timelines you still have to meet? How are you more creative? How are you thinking about, you know, consumers differently? So I would say it's been more exhausting because it takes a lot more of your brain power, but I wouldn't say it's more difficult, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's fair. But to your point, it does kind of force creativity because you just have no choice.
But creativity can be a lot of emotion and a lot of brain power.
Yeah, and just digging into that a little bit more, Snap, for example, is a really fast platform, and our audience, we certainly reach a lot of Gen Z and millennials. So we reach 75% of 13 to 34-year-olds. And part of that is an expectation that when they're consuming, they're not going to be bombarded with a 30-second ad. So the 6-second ad, for example, is really popular on Snap. And I know other platforms as well. And working with creative teams, a lot of folks, especially in entertainment, their art form is cutting a 30-second spot, or of course, something like a trailer. How have you worked to innovate and get creative teams to think more about a 6-second ad being something that actually drives impact, and having them really embrace that, knowing that it's pretty much against what anyone who's worked in entertainment has done historically. It makes it a hard story to tell, for sure.
Yeah, and I would say even, I worked in CPG before I worked in entertainment, and as marketers, we love to tell a story. That's why most of us end up in this job. And we love for that story to, be as nuanced and impactful as possible. I think where there's two things. One, where it's actually an easy challenge is like when that particular medium is what the audience or the consumer needs and how they consume story, then it's essential, right? There's no question about that's how you should deliver, rather than trying to get over the hurdle or the mindset of we need to tell a nuanced story. It's like, well, that's just not going to work. So there's no point in investing time and energy in that if it's not going to work for your consumer. And you really do have to meet them where they are and how they want to be spoken to. And so if you take that as read, that like, actually, this is how we're going to engage with them, and it's 6 seconds, and then it's finding the storytellers that really talk that language and communicate in that language. And so for us, like, we don't shy away from the junior person on the creative team that actually is of that generation and really can speak that language and can tell a story in that short amount of time, because that's the language that they communicate in day out, rather than going for the executive that's had many years of experience in trailer storytelling. So we're really, wanting to lean into the talents that each individual brings to the table. And if that's someone who actually might on paper have less experience, but be the best experienced person to tell that particular story through that particular format, then we absolutely embrace that. And so I think it's about finding the right creatives that can help you with your particular creative challenge. And I think, there is so much talent out there, regardless of age, any sort of demographic that you could throw at it, and really finding the right storytellers is key to making sure that your creative really lands.
Yeah, well, I love that you really take the perspective of finding the right person, regardless of how much experience they have. I think for anyone who's watching, who's maybe newer in their career, that is certainly, it's a positive and makes Absolutely. People feel good, I think.
For me, I'm all about like leaning into the things that are your strengths. And like, if you're younger in your career, like see that as a positive. Like you can tell all of us oldies like how we should be doing some of these things. And I think there's a real openness in organizations now to hear that message and know what we don't know versus, even 10 years ago, where I think the culture was very different.
Yeah, well, I think on the previous panel, Ashley had mentioned listening, and I just think that's so important, because there's so much that I certainly learned from the younger folks on our team as well.
Yeah, and I think if you think about a team, like you think about a sports team, like every person has their role. So, even though you have, certain structures in place, there are definitely people who are, I'm not like a sports person, so like I'm going to get all these analogies wrong, but like you definitely have like someone who's like a better defender and a better like kicker and all of those things. Yep. So on our team, we really lean into, we have our sort of traditional roles and the structure, but then it's like, who is the best placed person to really handle like this piece of it, based on their specific talents versus their years of experience. And I think that, if you're younger in your career, really try to like promote what you're particularly skilled at and where you can help and support. It's always like good language that I think people are really open to.
That's awesome. And then one of the things that's really evolved over the past few years is obviously augmented reality. Snap has placed a huge bet on it because we've made it so accessible. You open the app, the camera's there, and you can leverage that. How are you thinking about augmented reality, especially because you really own these worlds? I mean, Harry Potter, Fantastic Beasts are these worlds that people love to go in, and there are physical spaces like at Universal. How are you thinking about that as you look at marketing in the future?
Well, I think, I mean, there are very many forms of augmented reality, and it's a fun place for us to play as marketeers and creatives. And like you said, like the world in which we work in is full of magic, and augmented reality, definitely helps to lean into that side of the storytelling. And so I think it gives you the ability to go places that you can't go with traditional media or creative and technology. And I think it really brings, a consumer deeper into the experience of your world, regardless of whether that's an actual world, like the one that we're gifted with, or whether that is, your brand world. And so I think that deep sort of richness of engagement is really important when it comes to really growing that sort of affinity with your consumer. But for us, it really is about like what that can bring for us to storytelling. It's such a gift that technology can actually start to bring to life some of the things that we've only ever imagined to be true or possible. And so from our perspective, the future looks like more test and learn with that type of technology to see where it is right for our brand and our particular set of storytelling.
Yeah, no, it's great. And exactly, I mean, your world is so fun to be in and is that magic. So it really lends itself well to AR.
Yeah.
As you think about the next couple years, I don't know how far you've planned out, but what are the things that you are most excited about?
Most excited about? Well, I think changing consumer behavior and how it's changing, I think is really exciting, because as awful as the past year has been, personally for everyone, and some professionally, I would say that, we're about to see, we have seen, and we will continue to see the biggest shifts in consumer behavior than in a short period of time, I think, than ever before. And I really love a new challenge, and I really love things that force me to think differently or be more creative. And so I think continuing to see how, the consumer behavior landscape changes and evolves, and how, media companies and brands evolve with it, for me is like a really exciting place to be in, especially for the organizations that really are innovative and leading change, being at the forefront of that change and being able to sort of go on that journey with consumers, I think is really exciting. So for me, that's the thing that I would say I look forward to the most. And at some point, getting back in an office and seeing people face to face and being able to have a coffee with someone is pretty exciting as well.
It is. I agree. I look forward to that. I want to make sure I open it up to questions. We do have a few minutes, but I'm curious if there are any brands that you are looking at now and saying, wow, they are doing some really innovative, spectacular stuff.
I think we always keep an eye on brands and what they're doing. We're quite lucky that we work with like a network of brands who bring our brand to life for consumers. So whether that's a licensee or a retail partner, or even like working with Snapchat and some of the other digital platforms, we see you as a brand as well. And so we really are in constant conversation with our partners and our network of partners, really to think about like, okay, what does this mean for our consumer, and how can we sort of marry up the two? So I think some of our partners, I think on the last panel they mentioned that there was the upcoming panel with Walmart, and we've seen some of the things that we've kind of been doing in the kids space recently, and I think it's really exciting. I think Lego is the same. They've done some really cool things in the past like 18 months that I think are really exciting. But I would say that we're pretty lucky that we sit in a position where we're able to have the conversations with, people at Snapchat about what is coming up and how can we sort of leverage those, big corporate initiatives and work with them from a brand perspective. So I'm also very excited about some of the things that we're seeing come out of your organization, and also some other digital platforms.
Yes, of course. We're part of the mix. There are others.
Yeah.
And just building on that, Jess, there are certainly some folks on the line who are on the publisher partner side of the house. What do you look for, and what do you hope that every partner brings to you when you have a meeting with them?
Yeah, so I think, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of there's a lot of teams that actually manage those partners or other people that, they should be going to. So on the, CPG side, that's our consumer products team, for example. But I think it's, a respect for the world that has been created first and foremost, because that is what our fans really hold, near and dear to them, is this world that has been created and that they feel part of. And that's something that we've spent many years protecting and nurturing and making sure that, we don't sort of mess with that piece of it. And then also creativity and the spirit of partnership to move into, new grounds. But it's that balance of like the healthy respect for the world that exists. But how do we also go into new spaces that really are going to serve the fan? And we put the fan at the heart of everything that we do. And for us, the fan is the consumer. So you'll hear me use those words interchangeably, but really our fans are at the core. And so if we think of them first and foremost and what is right by them, that tends to be the decision that wins the day.
That's great. Yes, fans are number one. And I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. I'm very excited for when my older daughter is ready to read them.
Oh, I'm very excited for when she's ready to read them.
So I can dive right back in. I want to make sure, I know we have one question. Are there any thoughts this is from Aaron, any thoughts on Harry Potter licensing and NFT mania?
So there is a lot of conversation at our organization more broadly about NFTs. It's an interesting space that, all our brands are trying to wrap their arms around. So it's definitely like a conversation that's being had in our organization, but there's not one specific point of view when it comes to a brand. It's worth exploring, and there are people much smarter than I that are exploring that world. But yeah, I would say nothing on the table of the cards right yet for our brand, but that's not to say there won't be in the future.
Yeah, I don't know. Someone told me you say it nifty. I say NFT, but it certainly has come out of nowhere so quickly. And it would be interesting if J.K. Rowling was putting her first transcript for sale. I'm sure that would be insane. So
I'm sure there's
a
lots
new world
at the organization that is being discussed and that people would go crazy for.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions from the audience? I certainly have a few more, but want to give everyone an opportunity. Jess, what do you have coming up in the next year that from the brand perspective that you can share with us?
Well, this is going to make some people who remember this feel old, but we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of the first movie.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that is coming up, and we're thinking about like how we commemorate that and celebrate that with our fans. So I think that's like a pretty big and special moment for us. So we're definitely thinking about that, but I will say it does make me feel very old when I think back to the first movie coming out and the fact that it was 20 years ago.
It's crazy. And when you think about all the talent too that have been in the films and where they've gone, I feel like when you look back, so many people who are quote unquote famous today had roles in Harry Potter films, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing that, even from the likes of Bridgerton, we have cast members and that, had minor roles in Harry Potter, but like have become massive stars. So, it's like, it's really exciting to be thinking about the anniversary, but it's also definitely aging.
Yeah. And when you think about the next generation of Harry Potter fans, are you looking at their behavior and it's just so different? So you're having to look for new opportunities to find them that maybe don't even exist. How do you think about that?
I mean, we're very lucky that like the original generation, i.e. you, now has children that you want to introduce to the stories. And, you know, the stories are so powerful and timeless that, that really does become sort of the first point of entry. But, you know, how kids today engage with content is very different, because the landscape is very different to, you know, 20 years ago. So there is definitely a lot for us to think about, but, you know, we're very lucky that there are, you know, parents and grandparents and brothers and sisters and all sorts of people who, you know, want to introduce and be that first point of introduction to the brand or to the stories, because, you know, it's so special and beloved to them. So so that introduction point, you know, it is slightly different to what it used to be, but I think how we continue to engage them will look different based on, you know, different touch points that exist today that never existed 20 years ago.
Well, it's a brand that will obviously live on. To your point, it's all about storytelling, and I think each generation will tell it. So it's special, and you're very lucky to get to really work on it and continue that.
Yeah, it's such a privilege.
Absolutely. I just wanted to jump in. My older daughter is 9. She is counting down the days until we can go back to take her to Universal to go see the Wizarding World. I think she's seen all the movies. She's read all the books at least once. So, you know, I'll let you know how that goes, but you definitely have a huge new fan in her, and I'm sure she'll pass it down to, you know, everybody continuing the great tradition, right, of sharing these stories. So thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you, Alexa. This was wonderful. We were thrilled to have you both joining us today, and hopefully we'll have you back again soon and continue these conversations.
Thank you, Jess, and thanks for having us.
Thanks, Alexa. Thanks, David.
All right.
Bye.
Of course. Thank you to everybody in our community who tuned in today here on Zoom and on YouTube. Like I said earlier in the broadcast, all of today's content will be spliced out, and the individual sessions will be available in our on-demand section. Please give that take a look, and you can see all of today's content as well as all of our previous sessions. And with that, I'll leave you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, your week. We'll see you back again here in another live cast soon. Have a good one.